And you are watching another edition of Blewetts Blitz with my good friend and co-founder of Jets X Factor, Michael Nania, who woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get alerted to a Luka Doncic trade. That is it's a completely different story. Michael, what is up, man? Does it feel nice to get some of these positions filled for the Jets?
Yeah, it's been a pretty smooth process for the Jets. It feels like even as soon as Glenn was hired, we kind of heard about some of these names being in the mix. They've got it filled out pretty quickly. I'm mostly positive about these hires. I think for the most part, it's, in terms of as much as you could possibly know up to this point, I think it's largely a group that I'm happy with. So it's been cool seeing this process play out. But yeah, like I never like wake up that early in the middle of the night. I usually am a good sleeper, but for some reason I was summoned to wake up at 3 a.m. this morning, and I saw a text from Ben who was like, "Wait till you see what happened. The NBA is looking to rig ratings," or something like that. And then I looked at it and I saw that is definitely one of the more shocking trades I've seen in
Yeah,
sports.
it's quite wild, and I kind of see the point of that because the NBA has fallen off a little bit, but it's like, I don't know, it's like the equivalent of like trading Garrett Wilson for a second round pick. Like it doesn't feel like a lot for one of the better superstars in the NBA, but nonetheless, we'll get into the football stuff. A lot has happened in the last week, right? Aaron Glenn was hired about 8 days ago, right? Something like
Yep.
that, 8 days ago. And then obviously the Jets bring in Muji, if I'm pronouncing that right. I believe it's Muji.
Yep, it's Muji. I think
Yeah.
when I brought him up when we were talking about it, I was like, Mauji? I'm gonna go with Mauji, but
I'm
it's
literally just doing
Muji.
a moo like a cow.
Yeah.
G Muji.
I
And
want if he's good, I want Jets fans like if he walks on the field before a game, we got to do like the Mooj chants. I think that'd be
is it
cool if we had a chant for
would
our
it be
GM. But there's a
would it
high
be
bar
bad
before you
to
warrant those.
order a Aaron Glenn jersey? Because I may or may not have ordered a
I've thought
throwback
about it.
Aaron Glenn jersey.
I've thought about
Why
it.
not support? Why not support?
Yeah.
Last year, once Brick was hired as the interim, I brought a Brick to the games. We gave the Brick beer, we gave the Brick pork roll. It just didn't end up working out for the Brick because unfortunately we lost that game. But nonetheless, you got to support. You got to support, and obviously Aaron Glenn is an easy guy to root for. We'll talk about all that stuff. And obviously the next hour or two, but we'll say hello to some people in the chat. The go to just throwing some of the names out here, which we'll go over pretty much all of these people. Us at Jets X Factor and mainly Nania and some others, but Nania's been, I would say, the spear. Or the head of the spear, has been breaking down these guys individually. So we'll go into each guy individually, kind of what they offer, questions about them, some of their history, and things like that. Sean Jefferson remains the wide receiver coach, which I guess we'll just hit this really quickly. I didn't think about it until specifically this got brought up. Garrett Wilson, is he getting traded? Do we believe Dov and NFL runes and JPA football or wherever the hell that one is that I muted a while ago? Is Garrett Wilson getting traded? Where are you kind of leaning on that one?
Nah, I think that at least that specific report definitely seemed nonsensical. I know there were some discussions going back to, I think, December, but I just don't see it because some of the reasons being cited, like turnover with the head coach and quarterback and all that, it's like most teams in the NFL kind of have that. Maybe not to the Jets' extent, but they don't go through coaches that quickly. And they drafted a quarterback high. He didn't work out. They went and made the push for Aaron Rodgers. It's not really like this is, it hasn't worked out well, but it's not like they're not trying to be successful. So I don't see him pushing his way out. And plus, he gets to be like the top guy in this room going forward. He got plenty of targets last year, even if Adams took some of them when he came over. But I don't see it personally.
Yeah, I'm hoping that at the minimum he gives them another year, right? And obviously the Jets have control for another. What do we got? At least 3 more years, right? Year 4, 5th-year option, franchise tag. So 3, even 4 if you really wanted to double franchise tag him, which I don't think that would happen because the number would be astronomical. But you'd hope that he'd at least give this a shot to work out with Aaron Glenn. I think keeping Sean Jefferson as a receiver coach, who's apparently close with, is good. But yeah, the reason cited was like, hey, he has a lot of turnover at head coach. It's like this is his second head coach now in 4 years. Like it's not like he's had 3 new head coaches. But yeah, obviously you want to see him, be a Jets like homegrown superstar. The thing about it is I think the Aaron Rodgers and Davante thing would, risk his mental headspace a little bit because he was clearly frustrated at times last year. And if you look at the targets he got, like you would think to not be like, he shouldn't be upset because he was top 5, right? I believe like top 5 at least in targets in the NFL, if not top 10. But it seemed like he would get targeted really early a lot, really late a lot. But like there's a large chunks of game, like the second, third, even beginning of the fourth quarter, where he was just not a part of the game plan. And there's plenty of examples, and I'm only through the first, I think, 8 weeks of the Jets season. There's plenty of times where he's like wide open, and he's not even getting looked at. Whether it be a third down or whatever it may be, but there's plenty of times where he's just open and he's not getting looked at. So I'm sure it was a little bit frustrating for him to see Aaron Rodgers force feeding the ball to Davante. And I'm personally, I think you are too. I don't know if your stance has changed in the last 2 weeks, and tell me if it has. And I guess I'll throw that question to you. You haven't changed on the not wanting Aaron Rodgers back, right? Kind of wanting a new reset. The amount of cap, like the cap implications of just keeping these 2 guys around for this year. In 2026, 2027 are huge as well. So it's not just like a thing where it's, hey, we could have them for this year and kind of wipe the slate clean. It's like, no, if you keep these guys, your teams when he retires are going to suffer as well. So I'm personally not in the boat of keeping Rodgers. Again, if I thought the Jets were a Super Bowl contender type of team, then yeah, I would get it. But I just don't see the need for a guy who was mid at best last year and sometimes even worse than mid. A guy who was a polarizing figure in the locker room, and I don't think that's good for your new head coach to come into. Guy who's as polarizing as Rodgers is. And the cap implications if we keep these 2 guys. So I rather start new, whether that be just Tyrod and Jordan Travis and maybe a 2nd round guy, 3rd round guy, 4th round guy. Maybe you bring in another free agent. I'm not sure. But I just don't really know what Rodgers does for us other than getting us from maybe 8 wins with Tyrod to maybe 10 wins with Rodgers. And you put out some stuff on Twitter, and I think you're being a little bit sarcastic when you put it out there, that like Tyrod's numbers the last couple of years and similar, or if not better to Aaron Rodgers. And I think gun to your head, you would probably take Rodgers right now for a game. But how much is the drop off there? Like realistically, again, a game, 2, maybe 3, but is it worth it for what is it going to be if we keep Rodgers? $61 million cap hit in the next 2 years after he retires, and then whatever Davante's number is. I haven't gotten to the intricacies of that contract.
Right.
I'm still on the Rodgers no go with Rodgers train.
Yeah, I'm still on that side of it. And when I put out that thing about Tyrod's stats and all that, like it definitely was a little bit trying to, facilitate that conversation a bit. But I put out an article where I dove into that more beyond just the context of the tweet. And, I acknowledge that is over a smaller sample size from Tyrod. There was some garbage time this year. And it's not to say that he is better, or like you just said, if the Jets need to win 1 game tomorrow, and both are healthy, I'll take Rodgers. But the fact that it is a conversation at all, to me, because it is a conversation, and that's what the point of putting those numbers out there is that Rodgers isn't far enough ahead, if at all, at this point of his career, to where he's definitively a substantially better option. So the fact that it's close at all, to me, points you towards go with the guy who, would give you cap savings versus, keeping Rodgers, is less of a distraction, and, allows you to just culturally kind of move forward and start over anew with Aaron Glenn. So that's kind of how I look at it. It's less so about who's better. It's just the fact that Rodgers isn't good enough at this point of his career to be viewed as someone who's going to bring you a championship or any chance of it. So given that, and the fact that the Jets are transitioning culturally and in terms of, bringing in a new regime, I'd lean towards what is a better bridge option. So I would go with someone who, even if they're slightly worse, gives you all the other advantages that I just brought up. So that's still the side of it that I'm on. But, if he does take a pay cut, I guess it's justifiable, but it feels like it would have to be such a large pay cut to the point where it's almost unrealistic he would take such a pay cut for it to be worthwhile to bring him back. Because like I was talking to Rivka about it a little bit. She is a lot better with the cap stuff than me, but she was saying that for it to really make sense, he would have to almost go down to like a Gardner Minshew type of contract for it to be, a positive cap, situation for the Jets to
It
keep
was like
him
12 million
versus.
or something like that, right? He
Yeah,
didn't make
yeah.
a
So like
ton,
it would
but
have to be a huge sacrifice for him individually, which
mhm.
he already did when he came in. So, if he's down to do that, I guess, it could be justified, but I don't think he would do that, especially at this point of his career.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, so I definitely would still say I lean towards that side of, you know, moving on from him and just moving forward with Tyrod and whatever else you can add to that room. It's a bridge year. I don't think
Matt
that
Stafford?
the
You
Jets
say
should
Matt Stafford?
overvalue. That's an interesting one. I don't. It would be if I don't know. I would have to look into that one more. I know
Mhm.
I saw that rumor come up, but I definitely would have to look at his contract and everything. But it does sound a little interesting, just because I think he's a better player than Rodgers at this point. But it
Mhm.
would have been more intriguing if they did end up hiring Caley as their offensive coordinator. But considering that he didn't, maybe it's not as much of an option.
Mike LaFleur got in his ear. I'm convinced
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, with Rodgers too, and the thing you have to consider is like now, and he's going to be learning a new offense. With a rookie OC, at 42 years old, it just doesn't sound like a great combination. Like, is that rookie OC gonna be like, hey, no, Rodgers, like this is how I want it done, like put his foot down, or is Rodgers going to kind of dictate to him, and that's going to be
1
his
year apart
offense?
from him.
Yeah, and he's gonna be changing plays of the line of scrimmage and all this stuff. I rather not, and I get the point. And John B saying like, bring me in someone better than Rodgers, and I'll listen. I get that sentiment. I just don't think that he brings us, anywhere meaningful. So I'm not willing to bite a $61 million cap hit the 2 years after he retires. Obviously split it up or whatever, but 61 million within 2 years, for a guy who's going to get you another win or two, risk alienating Garrett Wilson because Devontae will stay, and you have to establish a culture with this guy as your quarterback. That's three massive negatives, and I can't. The slight positive of winning an extra game or two or maybe even three, it's just not enough for me. Like I want, and you heard Aaron Glenn and Muji. I forget. I don't know who it was. Maybe it was Muji after or whatever. But like actually maybe it was Glenn. Like they want to build a long term team, like successful team, and obviously everybody does, right? Like nobody's going to come in here and say I want to win one Super Bowl, then we're going to suck forever. But they emphasize like they want this to be a playoff team and a good team for years to come. And I don't think going for it all, with a 42-year-old quarterback and taking a massive cap hit is really would be like indicative of that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like, hey, you're saying you want long term, but then we're going for it with 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers. Like, what's the point of that? So I'm probably leaning towards the Jets not doing it. Like I actually think they're not going to, based on what I've heard. I think it's probably like maybe like 70% chance they don't, 30 they do. Even though there was some rumblings like as soon as Aaron Glenn was hired that it would be Rodgers being at quarterback, but I would probably say like 70-30 right now that it's not going to
Yeah.
be Rodgers.
Yeah, I agree with you. And maybe I'm reading into it too much, and
Mm-hmm.
my perspective is a little biased because, it's what I prefer. But just based on the way that Glenn and Muji talked about it at the press conference when the topic was brought up, it pushed me closer to them not bringing him back, because I feel like they had whenever you're at these press conferences, you have every opportunity to just, butter up every single player that, is mentioned. He's a great player. We're interested in having him back. We'd love to, but we got to have these discussions or whatever. But they never took that opportunity. There was no praise directed towards Rodgers. It was just anytime he's brought up, it was, and, Glenn got out in front of it. He's like, I know you're going to ask me about this. We're not talking about it. And that's really as far as he went. He didn't really take the opportunity to say anything about Rodgers that
Mm-hmm.
he could have. And again, maybe I'm reading into it too much, but that is the sense I get. And just based on his kind of philosophy that he established in that press conference and some of the hires he's made, it just seems like they've gotten a lot of like football guys, no nonsense type coaches. And I just have a hard time picturing that this new regime, especially with this type of philosophy, is going to sign up for another season of Aaron Rodgers and everything that comes with him after a season where he only won 5 games, despite all of that. So that I do agree. I'm not totally ruling out that he comes back, but 70% seems like I would. I would go like 80% actually.
Hmm.
I would maybe even go higher than that. Can't totally rule it out, but his press conference definitely pushed me closer to them not keeping him.
So speaking of press conference, and we'll get into the hiring now. We'll get to the rest of the chat. I see Ben in here saying that you need a haircut. Ben, go
Yeah,
focus on the Chargers, my guy. This is you're not a Jets guy anymore. You're a Chargers guy. It's okay. We
it's
miss you,
been
Ben.
at least 2 months. So
He's just jealous. So yeah, going into that, so through the process, my one was Vrabel. And I kind of agree with you. Like he wasn't that true like S tier. Like he was in the A tier. There was some questions with him. I
yeah.
don't think he's, I don't think he's like John Harbaugh, or Jim Harbaugh, or anything like that. Or Mike Tomlin. I think he's maybe a step below some of those guys, but he was the one. I would say Monken was my two, honestly. He didn't even get a job in this cycle. I just really like, where he's been, what he's done. My three was Aaron Glenn. Obviously gets hired. We get the hype videos, him as a Jet, great Jet. We see, he worked with Parcells and he still talks to Parcells and Sean Payton, and he still has a connection with Bill Belichick, and he was with Dan Campbell. Like so many good connections. And you kind of mentioned the press conference. Comes in, press conference. Unfortunately, I was in class, so I couldn't watch it live. I watched it a couple of hours after. But I think he absolutely smacked out of the park, right? Like, and it's just a press conference. But speaking as a Jets fan with Adam Gase in 2019, you can definitely blow a press conference, undoubtedly. Or maybe like some guy down south a little bit, Duval.
Yeah.
Like some people could really blow them. And Aaron Glenn didn't. Really stern. The message, love the message. The fact that he shut down the Rodgers stuff. It wasn't even in the actual press conference, but like the media scrum afterwards. He basically, like Rich is trying to get him to talk about if he's Parcells or whatever. And he's like, I'm not Parcells. I'm Aaron Glenn. And like, I loved it, being a little bit upfront with the media. We're the freaking New York Jets. So like, there's a lot of good quotes in there. So what do you think about his press conference?
Yeah, I loved it. And I don't like reading into press conferences too much. As you said, like you could win a press conference. Doesn't matter. You got to have a strategy. You got to execute and do all those things. But I just feel like he checked the boxes that were important to this team, which is, changing the culture, establishing standards, and just kind of creating an expectation of winning, which is, usually it's, with the Jets, it doesn't feel like that is the way they approach things. It's more like we'll take it as it goes. We're going to build this thing, but it just kind of feels like with him, winning is what is going to be expected. And I like the answer he gave in terms of accountability when he was asked, about it. And he talked about the importance of just communicating expectations and letting players know, like, this is what is expected of you. And then from there, if you don't hold your end of that bargain, then it as a player and you can hold yourself accountable because the expectations have been laid out. And just, Gase obviously had a horrendous introductory press conference. I actually don't really remember Salah's too much. Like, I don't remember anything standing out too much about that one. Nothing sticks in my head. So I guess you could have like an average press conference too, in that sense. But yeah, like this doesn't win him games or, necessarily improve his stock or anything as a coach. But I do feel like he explicitly communicated a lot of the things that we want the Jets' new head coach to be able to do. And, it's encouraging to hear that, he is aware of and acknowledged so many of these boxes that we wanted to see checked and want to see checked going forward.
Beloved Peace is asking a question about Sean Jefferson. We mentioned him a little bit ago. Outside of Garrett, he feels like he hasn't developed any other receivers. Well, he was only here for a year, right? Obviously, he was here for a couple of years, a few years ago. But this last year, you only have a year to really develop guys, and the only guy he could really truly like work with who had any kind of like value like poured into them was Corley, and it was only 1 year, and we knew he was raw coming out of college. I guess Gibson didn't really develop. I don't think he was given a ton of talent to necessarily develop, right? Like, who was the second, third, fourth round pick? Well, I guess Corley is the fourth round pick, but it's not like he had a ton of guys to develop. I don't think I'm not like concerned about having Sean Jefferson. He has a good reputation throughout the league. If you kind of look into him a little bit, obviously has a very good relationship with our number one receiver. So that's good enough for me. Now, do I wish maybe there was a little bit of like progress from a Gibson or Corley showed us a little bit more? Sure. But it's not something that I'm concerned necessarily about with Sean Jefferson.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard, especially with assistant coaches, to really understand, like,
Yeah,
how much should they be attached to the success of the players under them? Because you could have a coach who isn't good at all. Maybe he just shows up, but his players happen to be really talented and they
Eric Bieniemy.
succeed. Yeah, that could be an example. Like, he was getting head coach interviews all the way back. Now he's a running backs coach. So like you never really know. But I think it does say something that the Jets let most of their assistant coaches go, even some of the ones who did work with units that were successful. But Sean Jefferson, he stuck around. Aaron Glenn came in and wanted to keep him. So, part of that could be like, their fellow players or something like that. But,
Yeah.
I think it says something that he wanted to keep him.
Yeah, it could be a good reputation. It could be the fact that Garrett Wilson loved them, and like even even if he doesn't, if he didn't develop Gibson or like Corley necessarily how he wanted to, it's like I think Garrett Wilson's just, like if you're giving him that credit, even though he came in his third year, right? He wasn't here the year prior, right? It was just this year he was hired again.
Yeah, it's 20. He was the assistant head. I just brought it up. 19 to 20, he was their wide receivers coach. Then he went to Arizona for 2 years, Carolina 23, and then came back last year.
Okay, but yeah, even if you're giving credit for Garrett Wilson, like, hey, that's plenty good enough. Even though Garrett Wilson was obviously a superstar in his first and second year, and this year really wasn't much different, just a few more touchdowns. Eagle Fang says, I wonder if the Jets will field the 96 uniforms to honor Aaron Glenn.
I don't. I feel like those are my least favorite Jets uniforms in franchise history, personally.
And they're already kind of close to their primary now, right?
Yeah.
So you'd think, like, I'd personally, like, yeah, I guess that would be fine, but I'd rather
it's like a worse shade of green, and there's black outlines around the numbers, and just like a lot of like extra lining and striping. It's kind of I like how simple these ones are. It's very classic.
And I like the throwbacks to the Super Bowl ones too, because they're different. Where like our current uniforms in '96, like, okay, you change the outline in the green a little bit, right? Like that's really it. Like I don't know. It's a little bit too busy for me as well. Johnny Boy says, should I not get hyped and be a lot more cautious? But the hires have been amazing. And we'll go through them each individually. Maybe we'll talk about some guys we want to see added. I would like to see some more like senior assistants on the staff. And this will actually bring me into my point here, really. And we'll go through all the positions, and for all of them, I give it a thumbs up for the most part. The biggest concern is the offensive line coach, right? 1 year as being an assistant offensive line. I forget I forget his name. You'll tell me in a second.
Steve Hayden.
Hayden. Yeah. I want to try to find like a clinic of his. Maybe he hosted a clinic or something like that. And I kind of see what he's about in his system. Like, I don't even know if he's more zone or gap. I'm assuming maybe I don't know if you have an answer to that. Actually, you wouldn't, because he's a tight ends coach. You have no freaking idea. I don't want to put you on the spot there. There's just no way to know that thinking about it. But that's one spot where I really want to see like an older offensive line coach who maybe doesn't want the entire responsibility, but can help him out a little bit. Because going from tight ends coach to offensive line coach is obviously different. And now he did develop, Laporta in Detroit. And apparently their blocking was pretty good from their tight ends. But still, like, how much experience does he have coaching the offensive line? So, you can't get much worse than Keith Carter, obviously. But that's the one in terms of concern that I have is the offensive line coach at this point.
Yeah, that was definitely the biggest leap that they took, because some of these other ones, I really like in terms of resume, most of these hires, guys who are, and Wilkes has been a head coach, plenty of defensive coordinator experience. Good to have a guy like that with the first time head coach. Then obviously they hired the linebackers coach. Just trying to pull up the name. We're going to remember these names.
Aaron
Curry. Yeah, he's been a defensive coordinator. So, yeah, there's a lot of these hires where they've either been in this role or even higher than the current role. So it's good to have that experience with a first-time head coach.
Was Curry? I don't think Curry was a defensive coordinator or head coach. It was Washington, the D-line
that's
coach.
Who it was. Yeah, we'll get it all straightened out. Washington was the defensive coordinator. So yeah, you have some guys like that, but I mean, you say the same thing about with Hayden, like we just did with Jefferson. Like, I don't think he gets this job if he doesn't have a reputation that warrants it. It's not like they just plucked him out of thin air. But at the same time, if it doesn't work out, I think we do have there is the chance that we could look back on this in a few years, like, should they have gone for someone a little more established in that role versus, taking a leap on someone who's only been a tight ends coach in the league, he was an assistant O-line coach with the Cardinals for 1 year, under Wilkes actually that year. But yeah, like it's definitely a leap. So we'll see how it goes. I think tight end and offensive line, crosses over in a lot of ways in terms of the blocking techniques, the blocking scheme, and everything. But it is a different job. So it could be great. It could not work out. So this is definitely the most ambitious, I would say, of the hires that they made.
Yeah. And the good thing about it too is like, hey, he was with Aaron Glenn, so I'm sure Aaron Glenn was aware of him and obviously has had a connection. So if Aaron Glenn, if he trusts his judgment, then hey, he was with this guy for the last couple of years. So maybe he can do it, but still bringing in some type of like consultant on the offensive line, I think would be a big move for the Jets, because I think that's minus OCDC. I think O-line coach is the next biggest hire that you're going to do. Like I would take a really good offensive line coach over a special teams coach or anything like that. And like, you can almost even argue with defensive coaches, like it might be OC, O-line coach, DC for the Jets right now. I think O-line coach is massive, and some people don't realize it. Just look at Keith Carter, last year and throughout his years.
Yeah, they've just struggled with it so much. I mean, I put it out a few days ago. I think they've had 7 straight offensive line coaches who couldn't last more than 3 seasons with the team, and most of them are 1 or 2 seasons. So they struggled with it. And you look at the teams that have really good established offensive line coaches, it's probably more so than any other position coach able to like be consistent and establish a standard with that position. When you look at guys, like in Philadelphia with Jeff Stoutland, when you get a guy like that, you can be consistently successful and expect them to just pull Mekhi Becton in there and, suddenly be competent and make it work. It really is an advantage to have a guy like that in this position. So, maybe Hayden can turn into that, and it would be huge if he could. Like you said, the fact that like it gives you more confidence that they're making this type of hire with someone that Glenn knows versus if it were with another team, because he's seen firsthand how he coaches, what his approach is and all of that. Sometimes I think it is dangerous to be, too focused on your inner circle for hires. Like I've talked about that with Saleh a lot. And I like that, Glenn has, been a little outside the box in terms of approaching this hiring cycle. He's interviewed guys and made some hires that he isn't necessarily connected to. But in this case, I do think it is a positive that, hiring a coach is taking a leap in responsibility that Glenn has seen firsthand that he believes he's capable of doing it.
John says that Rodgers had the third best statistical season in our history, which I think speaks more to the fact that the Jets have had horrendous quarterback play over the last, 60 years or so. I don't think that speaks so much to Rodgers. I think he did better late. There was so many examples of him missing guys wide open, and it just didn't look like the same Rodgers. Jaden saying the sample size is so small you can't compare the two. That's ridiculous. That's specifically why I mentioned that Nania was being sarcastic. I just, we're talking about Rodgers. I think he's at this point at the minimum bottom half of the league quarterback.
And even that argument, it's like, Rodgers has a larger sample size, but what does that prove? That he's reliable at being below average? That's all it really proves, because that's all he's been the last 2 full seasons that he's played. And he's going to be 41. He's been injured the majority of the past 3 seasons. I don't think he's trending upward from where he is. He got really good pass protection this year. They gave him the superstar receiver that he wanted. They had the offensive coordinator that he wanted. I don't really see how it's going to get any better than the 20s to mid 20s metrics that he had in things that matter besides, box score stats.
Yeah.
That he racked up while throwing the 3rd most passes in the league, or 2nd most passes in the league.
Yeah, so, for like a half a yard of an attempt.
Exactly. So it's just a lot of not very informed discourse about Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this is like kind of telling people how to fan, and like people, if you want to root for Rodgers to come back, like that's fine. Like that's your prerogative. But for me personally, like, I'm not Like, yeah, would I like to see the Jets win 10 games this season? Sure, obviously I would, but for me, it's more long term and what's the long term success of this team. For me, like, yeah, and you kind of mentioned it the other day, and I thought, or not the other day, you mentioned this a while ago, and I thought about it. Because like Ravens fans, like they're pissed at every year because they make the divisional round, they lose, and you're like, no matter how, like if your team doesn't win the Super Bowl, everybody's disappointed, everybody's pissed. Now, obviously, we've been really down in the dumps, but it's just like, yeah, I would like to, but at the end of the year, I'm still gonna be like, shit, okay, cool, we got to the wild card round and lost. What happens next year? Oh, here you go, Joe. Here's a $61 million cap hit for Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson's pissed off and has requested a trade, and you just paid Davante Adams $30 million, or whatever it was last year. Here, now try to build a team. Like that's what it's about. I get wanting to see 10 wins, James. Like I 100% do if that's what you want. But for me, it's about, hey, take a win or two less this year to build it out long term. Like that's just personally how I root. I don't think anybody's wrong. Like there's no factual way to be right or wrong about Rodgers. Yeah. It's just how you root type of thing. And for me, again, it's about, I want the coach to come in and establish his own culture and not have a guy that's polarizing. Right. And again, risk alienating your best player on offense in Garrett Wilson. I just don't think it's worth it for a win or two. And like you said, give Rodgers, say he's again, however we quantify this, the 22nd best quarterback in the NFL last year. What would Tyrod have been? 28, 27? Something like that. Like I think he's a low end starting quarterback in this league when he's healthy. So I just don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said because, I understand the appeal of having him. Again, like I would take him over Tyrod in a vacuum, both healthy, one game. He'll be better next year, most likely. And like he's a fun guy to watch when he's still healthy and slinging it. Like there are still very few quarterbacks who can do it the way he can do it. And I think, in a lot of ways, his off-field persona is kind of like overblown, over-criticized. He's been a good teammate in a lot of ways. So I see the appeal of all that. And there is like an aura to it and an energy that is appealing versus like, here's Tyrod Taylor in 2025. Mm-hmm. So like, I understand that. And there's appeal to it. And there is, if he's willing to take a pay cut, if he's willing to adapt to a new scheme and all that, he still can serve that bridge role in a positive way. So I acknowledge all that. It's just, given all of the information at hand between his performance last year, Tyrod's performance in recent seasons, the contract aspect and the culture aspect, all those variables, it's just my opinion that I believe the Jets' best path forward towards a Super Bowl, not more wins next season, but a Super Bowl within the next even decade, I believe that it is to move forward from Aaron Rodgers. It's not to say that I hate him or he's the worst guy on planet Earth or anything like that, because that's usually how it's taken. If you're like in favor of not wanting a certain player, it means like you think he should be banished from the planet and like live in a box floating through space or something. But
Michael Clemens.
No. Yeah, he's the only one I would say that about. But yeah, it's just like it's just trying to make the best choice to push the Jets towards winning a Super Bowl, and I think that is what that choice would be.
Yeah. And somebody, I just lost the chat for a second, but I think James mentioned that he had 7 TD drops and 0 coaching. We brought in the coaching that he specifically wanted, so that's his fault if you're going to blame the coaching. And 7 TD drops, like, okay, what about when
how many
has
touchdowns he threw that were like screen passes where he didn't have to do anything,
or Hail Mary, which is great, but you just chuck it up. The last game, go back and watch, like he has Lazard wide open for a touchdown in the seam, but because he wanted to throw his 500th pass to Davante Adams, he forces it into double coverage. Like there's plenty of
one against the Vikings where Garrett Wilson was wide open, they could have won that game.
Yeah, it's like there's plenty of examples of him.
The one against the Seahawks where Wilson was wide open and he missed him. And the thing with the drops too, like there are metrics that account for that, like adjusted completion percentage, where it counts drops as completions. And even after doing that, he's still near the bottom in most of those numbers. So it doesn't really excuse anything.
Yeah, saying let Rodgers walk, but who are you bringing in? I keep hearing this from many content creators. There's no solution brought to the table. The one thing I'll say about that is I don't think Rodgers is a solution, though. Like, can that be the answer to your question without bringing in somebody? Now, maybe it's McCord in the second round. Maybe it's Milrow in the second round. Maybe it's this who's the guy? Jackson Dart in the second round. Maybe they trade up for Cam Ward. Maybe they trade back, get some extra picks, and then trade up next year. Like there's options for the Jets. It's just like I don't think that he's a solution. Like, is that fair to say? Like, even if I don't have an answer necessarily, which to me, it's probably either trading back up into the first for a quarterback, drafting one in the second round, let them develop. Like, that's probably where I'm at right now. But I don't think Rodgers is necessarily like the answer, if that makes sense either.
Yeah, I don't see. Well, he's the answer too. Like we talked about, does he give you a better chance at 9-10 wins? Probably, but is that the goal, or is it to get to a Super Bowl at some point? Is it worth the, as things stand, $14 million in cap space you would be wasting, between this year, next year, however that's divided? It's a lot of money to dedicate to someone who's not going to win you a championship for production that is not very good. Like, again, like a lot of fans point to passing touchdowns, passing yards, and all these things that don't really matter. But if you look at like truly all-encompassing metrics like QBR, even passer rating, which is really basic, or EPA, any of that stuff, he's mid-20s to some of them he's closer to 30. So it's just not there. I don't see what he's a solution to.
Exactly. That's my question too. What defines solution? And tell me how Rodgers is the answer to said solution. I just don't see it. James is super negative. We have people saying great staff, people saying terrible staff, no experience besides Wilkes, and he stinks because he goes from team to team. Head coaching experience, interim head coaching experience. He went to San Fran and had the number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 defense in the NFL that year. So his last year in the NFL, he had a top 5 defense. So you're complaining about experience, but you're saying like, yeah, he's going from team to team. Well, no shit. Like, how else do we have him if he's not bouncing from team to team? Chris Harris, the defensive pass game coordinator, called the pass game defense for the Titans for the last 2 years, and last year he was like number 2 in the NFL. Eric Washington, defensive line coach, has been a defensive coordinator for years. And obviously now a defensive line coach, and then their staff isn't done. Like, what if they bring in Haley? Then he's gonna say, James is gonna say, oh, Haley bounced from team to team, he sucks, I don't like Haley. It's like, okay, so you just don't. It's fine. Like,
I just don't know who the great
coaches
out there are that people are trying to hire. They elevate up the ranks if they're good. Like, they would be a head coach. If they're not a head coach, there's some sort of flaw in their resume that has caused that. If they're available. So I think with Wilkes, you're getting a guy who's been a defensive coordinator at multiple stops, has been a head coach. Like, that's your experienced guy. And, he's working with a defensive head coach. So it's not as if the defense is entirely his responsibility. It's similar to like with the last setup, Robert Saleh may not have called the defense, but it was very much his design. And that setup worked pretty well defensively. And then with Engstrand, like before, that was really rumored, he probably would have been my favorite target. I just didn't think about it because I thought Detroit was just going to promote him. But, they go with John Morin, more experienced guy. But, that's the type of.
I want to interrupt you before you do that. Because like in terms of Engstrand, because people bring up that concern. Well, Ben Johnson didn't bring him, and Campbell didn't promote him. So what would be kind of your? And I'm not saying to just defend him. Like, don't defend the Jets blindly. I don't think we do that here. We kind of talk about things in a nuanced way. But like, what would be your at least response to that, even if you agree with it?
Well, I do think that is a legit concern. I think that is definitely something to keep in mind going forward. Like, if it doesn't work out, that could be something you look back on. Like, why didn't the Lions just promote him in-house or something like that? But, maybe it could have been, Campbell wants to win now. He wants a more proven guy. And John Morin, who's, an older coach, has been an offensive coordinator, something like that. But that is a legitimate concern. That's fair. I wouldn't write that off. But I do think like this is the route I wanted to go versus like, a lot of the Saints guys he was linked to, whether it was Carmichael, Lombardi, versus, I would rather go with someone who's up and coming, who hasn't done it before, but has been a part of a good forward thinking offense, versus like, someone who, and has, experience, but the experience wasn't actually
Arthur Smith.
All that successful. Yeah. Like an Arthur Smith or something like that. So this is the route I want them to go, like him or Nick Caley, who, didn't want to come here, which can't ever blame someone for that. But this is the route I wanted them to go. But having said that, the fact that the Lions did not promote him, I think, is a fair criticism.
Yeah, and with that, like, hey, if maybe he wanted to call plays and he knew with Ben Johnson he wouldn't, so he didn't want to go with him. And the thing with Dan Campbell, like, hey, what if? And again, this is why, like, there could be, and there could be more. I could spin this more negatively too, but like, there's just so many questions. Like, hey, what if Dan Campbell wanted Morton because his entire coaching staff just got robbed, and he just wants a guy who he knows is going to be good, and he wants a veteran guy instead of having another young guy with a staff that just got completely turned over. Like, there's plenty of reasons he cannot have been the answer for the Lions. And I like the fact that he was a pass game coordinator and he had one of the most prolific passing offenses in the NFL. And Dan Campbell was saying, like, he brought a lot to the table and he was involved in a lot of the game planning, which is awesome. He wasn't just a passenger, So there's some concern about Eggstrand. There's a little bit concern about the offensive line coach, who I keep forgetting, Hayden or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So those are two of my concerns. But I like Washington. I like Wilkes. I like Curry. The Steelers linebackers the last couple of years have all been really good, and he's been a big part of that. Aaron Curry, who formerly played in the NFL as well. And obviously the Jets have they want a lot of people who have played the game before. Again, which I think could be great because you relate to the players, but I do want some, again, more vet consultant type guys, and we'll see how the staff rounds out. What if they bring in Doug Peterson in some type of way, or Todd Haley, or whoever it may be, so there's still a lot of time to bring in some of these guys, but we can't really know about Engstrand and his offense and what it's going to be unless we go back and look at the Lions a little bit, and maybe again he'll be similar to that. But with Wilkes, the interesting thing about Wilkes, and obviously again, like, we want a guy who's been around. We wanted the vet in Wilkes, and he's bounced around a little bit, has head coaching experience, has called defenses for multiple years. Again, the last time he called the defense for an entire year, they were a top 5 defense in the 49ers. And then it's not like they continued that success in 2024 with a different coach. They dropped off, the face of a cliff in 2024 without Wilkes. And I don't think that much turnover on the roster. So Wilkes was doing something that worked. And apparently he just didn't see eye to eye with Shanahan on certain things. Now, the big question I have is how much, I know Glenn's not going to call the defensive plays, but how much is he going to he's gonna have obviously a say if he wants to have a say, but how much input is he going to put into how the defense is being installed? Because based on Nania's article about I think you put out an article, right, and like snap percentages and stuff.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, he sent me and I was reading, and I was taking care of my kid and I got yelled at because I was watching or looking at Nani's article and not my kid. Nonetheless, you have Aaron Glenn, who's more man heavy. And you have Wilkes, who is more zone heavy, cover 3, cover 4, I believe were the top ones, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a Steve Wilkes team, typically you're going to blitz a lot, cover 3, cover 4, which the Jets have been doing plenty in terms of the 3 and 4 the last couple of years. So it shouldn't be that big of a transition, even though guys like to run different cover 4s, different cover 3s. There's 1,000 of each one of them. But who do you think's gonna like if you had to say now, and obviously again impossible to know, but like, are the Jets a more man heavy team, or are they a more zone heavy team? Like, who wins that battle? If I don't think that's a good word for it, but
yeah, it's hard to say because we just don't know yet. But if I were to lean one way, I think it'll be more close to Wilkes' tendencies, because in Glenn's Detroit tenure, like there was a lot of fluctuation, and I think that was something that I found appealing about him, is that, like, from year to year the man rates were up and down, blitz rates were up and down. He tried different things, and eventually when they peaked this year and they became a great unit, what worked was the heavy man coverage, the heavy blitzing, but he experimented with different things as they built up that roster and went through that development. Whereas with Wilkes, and I laid it out in the article that I put out a couple days ago, his tendencies are pretty consistent. And he was, with a different team at every stop. He never has coached the same unit 2 years in a row as a defensive coordinator or head coach. So the fact that some of these things carried over so consistently, like every team pretty much was zone heavy, blitz heavy, exception being the 49ers. He kind of stuck with their philosophies when he went there. But other than that, it was always zone heavy. And so I do think that, given Glenn's sort of open-mindedness and Wilkes' consistency with what he's wanted to do across his stops, I feel like it's going to be more of like what we've seen from Wilkes. But I'm curious to see what that blend turns out to be.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point that he's been more like he's adjusted more. So that's definitely a really good point. And then I think the other big takeaway from that article was okay. Obviously he's more 4-3 heavy, which the Jets were 4-3 heavy. The fact that they're cover 3, cover 4, and then the other biggest takeaway, and obviously add some more on, was that he's heavy nickel, which is great because somebody said on Twitter the other day, who the hell was it? I wanted to quote tweet it, but I didn't want to get in an argument. But they were like, oh, like the Jets don't have a lot of building blocks on defense, and then like they named a couple players like, unless you believe in guys like Michael Carter II. I'm like, what do you the highest paid slot corner in the NFL who's been a top 5 to 10 guy minimum the last like 3 or 4 years? Like, what do you mean if we believe in Michael Carter? Like, Michael Carter's a proven player, but nonetheless, heavy nickel. Like there were some years where he's like high 70s, low 80s, right? Which is a really high number. I think typical teams are like in the high 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Again, not a stat guy here. That is obviously Michael and not me. But so nickel heavy. And then is there any other kind of like takeaways from the tendencies of Wilkes defense other than the 3, the 4, nickel and most likely a 4-3 and heavy blitzing, right? That's probably the main takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, typical NFL team nowadays is like 65% nickel. Okay. Everyone's doing it. The only team last year that was less than 50% nickel was the Rams. So for most teams, it's more than half the time. But yeah, 3 of the last 4 seasons that Wilkes coached as a primary either DC or head coach, they were over 80% nickel, including when he was a head coach with the Cardinals, they were 86%. So it's going to be almost the entire game. I would if they maintain that, 4 out of every 5 plays is going to be nickel with him. And I think that's a good fit coming into the Jets because, like you said, you have one of the most respected and productive nickel corners in the league with Michael Carter already.
Who even against like base personnel, like he's physical enough to be in the box. Like even if it's a little bit miscast.
Can play the run, like has good size and strength for that position. Like and that's a mold that works well for a lot of the top defenses. Like the Bills with Taron Johnson, like he's played the majority of their snaps. He went down in that championship game, and that was a huge factor in why that went the way it did. So playing nickel heavy when you have a great nickel corner can be a very good formula in today's league, considering how offenses play, usually with 3 receivers and a lot of speed on the field, with receivers getting smaller and quicker. You have to play with that. So I like that aspect of his defensive philosophy. On top of that, zone heavy. It's consistently been well over 70, sometimes close to 80% zone with his defense. Then, like you said, cover 3, cover 4 are his favorites. In terms of coverages, not too different from what the Jets have done in recent years, but the blitzing is definitely going to be there. Outside of the Niners, he's always been over 35%, sometimes over 40% blitzing, which is really, really high. So yeah, I would say those are some of the main things.
And we have a super chat, which I did not see. Right now, thank you, No Skills. Here's the hoping Glenn is to Saleh what Saleh was to Gase. I'm not sure how to take that because was Saleh that much? Like, obviously, he was better than Gase, but not so much of a massive improvement considering Gase won 7 games with one of the most barren rosters in the NFL, and Saleh managed to.
We have breaking news from 3 minutes ago. Coaching staff news.
Okay, go ahead.
Jets are hiring Charles London as their quarterbacks coach.
Don't know who that is. Tell me, is there anything about him?
Seahawks quarterbacks coach last year. He's 50 years old. He's a veteran. I have to look him up. I don't know either. So
there you go, James. There's a veteran.
That is from Tom Pelissero.
Now, did he have part in the Geno Smith turnaround? Has he been there since Geno Smith got there and has recently turned him into at least an okay starter? Last couple of years.
Looks like he just got there last year.
Son of a bitch. Where is he that year?
Titans quarterbacks coach in pass game 2023. Not great. Falcons quarterback coach 21 to 22. Not great.
Matt Ryan.
Then before that, he was a running backs coach for Bears 18 to 20, Texans 14 to 17. Before that, he was a Penn State running backs coach 12 to 13. And that's the majority of it.
So kind of lukewarm. Well, I would say lukewarm on the quarterbacks coach, considering he hasn't really developed any quarterbacks.
Not amazing. But I guess he's a veteran. Like it was when I saw the David Blau rumors, I thought that was a little questionable because the guy's not even 30 yet. It kind of feels like going down the Calabrese route again, but at least he played in the league. But they go the veteran route. Not the most amazing resume, but
yeah, I would say like, and again, we'll get through all the other guys. Like I like Curry, I like Washington, I like Wilkes, I like Harris, I like a lot of the defensive staff. Not in love with the offensive line quarterbacks coach, but we'll see. Obviously, it's so hard to know, right? Like it's almost impossible with a lot of these guys. To know, but yeah, I would like to see. I would like to have Googled him and seen that. Oh my God, like yeah, he was there for the last 4 years, and Geno Smith turned himself around like in those years. But you talk about the Titans, who were not great in 2023. Of what was that? Was that the end of Tannehill, or was that Levis and what's his face? Malik Willis, right? So right
here
there,
we go.
okay. Yeah, Texas, like running backs coach, quarterbacks, and so he had Matt Ryan. Then he had
was Ryan still there in 21, or was that like when they went to Ritter in 22?
I don't know. I don't. Maybe that was like Matt Ryan.
21. They still had Ryan. Remember he scored the Jets in London, so they still had him there. 22.
Every
I
first
think
down they got
was Ritter. Yeah.
Every first down they got was like squaw. I was like, oh my God, it's so annoying. Yeah, so we'll see. I'm hoping to read a little bit more into him, and maybe somebody really, maybe Sean Payton loves him or something like that. Not the best resume in the entire world, but it is.
What is the coaching tree here? Seahawks, McDonald, Titans, Vrabel, Falcons, Arthur Smith, right?
Yeah. So Arthur Smith, Vrabel. So
Bears was Nagy, right? 18 to 20.
Sounds right. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm never gonna like overly criticize an assistant coaching hire because we don't know the guy. He must have a good reputation. But as far as resumes go, this will be the one I probably question the most among these hires, because I just there's a lot of seasons on here, and I just don't see a lot to go.
And especially considering the fact that the Jets are most likely going to be developing a quarterback in the next year or two. That's obviously a massive hire. So we have some questions. I'll be transparent and say I do not love that one. But another super chat from Double R. I envision Garrett Wilson will be like St. Brown in Eggstrand's offense, which heavy slot, heavily targeted, which, hey, yeah, sign me up. Give Garrett Wilson free releases, give him a ton of targets. And like, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here. I think St. Brown, like you could have guys who are not as dynamic be great players. Like I don't think Larry Fitzgerald was ever the most dynamic player, but he's a great route runner, amazing hands, dropped a ball or two a year. Some years not even a ball with like 100+ targets, which is ridiculous. But I think that Garrett Wilson at his absolute peak is a more dynamic player than St. Brown. Like let's say that St. Brown is, whatever his ceiling is versus Garrett Wilson's ceiling. I think Garrett Wilson's ceiling is actually higher than St. Brown because I think he's a better athlete. Now St. Brown has better hands and is probably a little bit better, more nuance of a route runner. But yeah, I could see it. Give Garrett Wilson free releases in the slot all day. Because for Garrett Wilson, if there's one area he struggles in, it's still, for me, getting off of press, which I brought up in college and people said that was crazy, but look at his last couple of years, him versus press. And then vertically, like he's not the best vertical receiver in terms of going up and getting it. On the sideline, he's not the best vertical threat right now. So I think giving him crossers and slants, stuff like that over the middle, and being the first read is exactly what you want for Garrett Wilson. Because I don't think he is the best, true X receiver. I think Garrett Wilson is really more of a slot or a Z than he is like a true X at this point, which is not saying like you could be the number one receiver at slot in the league. It's not saying you have to be an X to be successful. I just don't think that's his best role. So yeah, St. Brown, sign me up.
Yeah. What do you think in terms of like how much their, Engstrand might make the offense look like Detroit's offense versus kind of his own vision? Because I know he has more of like a West Coast background. I saw a clip of him talking about some of those influences from earlier in his career before he's with Detroit. So like, what do you think in terms of, are we going to get an attempted copy of that Lions offense, or could he blend in some of that, other influences that he's been under?
There was an interview, like I think he's at a press conference where he kind of mentions that, where he's talking about like Ben Johnson has some different ideas and he comes from different coaching trees, and then I have some different ideas as well. So I'm sure it's impossible to know that, right? Like what was his influence in the passing game? Was it all Engstrand, like a lot of it? Then obviously I'm assuming that it's going to look like that. But if it was more 90% Ben Johnson and Engstrand just throw out some ideas, then it might look a lot different. So it's hard to know exactly like the input he had in Detroit, but we're expecting it to look quite similar, right? With some of the trick plays and stuff they had in the past game, throwing to extra tackles and whatever else it may be. So I think we're going to see some. Or would you say you saw something that made you giggle internally there?
Did you see my banner that I put up?
No, played for the Jets. Breaking news.
Breaking news. No one knew that.
Yeah, so and by the way, that was not the only reason I wanted him. Looking into him a little bit more, again, the connections and stuff. But nonetheless, thank you for the super chat, double R. Matthias, Matt, I was just calling Matt. If you cut him now, what's the dead cap hit for Rodgers? It's there's something with June 1st, whatever. I'm assuming it's gonna be post June 1st, and I think at that point,
I think if they cut him now, the whole cap hit gets accelerated to this year, which would be 49, which I don't think is possible or tenable for them to actually deal with that. So I think it has to be, if I have this correct, I think it has to be like a post June 1st cut, which is the same total amount, but you're pushing, I think, 35 of it to next year, and it would only be 14 this year. So it would give you huge savings for this year. But you're pushing some of it to next year. Versus I think if you cut him now, it's 49 immediately, nothing next year.
Whereas if he stays,
which I don't think they could actually handle that.
Whereas if he stays for the next year, then it's $61 million over the next 2 years. And I'm not sure how again, this is a Rivka thing. I'm not sure how Devontae's cap hit affects us long term if he stays on the team this year either. This year it'd be a $30 million cap hit, and then there's 3 years of dead money or whatever it is. I'm not sure exactly what Devontae, but that's a sizable cap hit. You're talking about 49 versus $61 million. Like $61 million, it's quite a bit. Again, if he takes a pay cut, fine, whatever. Well, I guess we'll see. But rolling with Tyrod next year as a starter, probably. Unless hey, does Jackson Dart raise himself into the top 10? Did they trade up for Cam Ward? Does Cam Ward fall to them? I'm kind of down for anything. I was planning on watching Cam Ward, which by the way, people who are the draft fans, I am getting back into the draft. I literally just finished my one of my reviews before I got on here. I have watched in full and have full-blown reviews on them. I just got to do the actual video on Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Tyler Warren, and McMillan. So I'm knowledgeable about those guys. And then I still have to do, I just started Campbell, Jahdae Brown, Jalen Walker, Jahad Campbell. I'm doing Banks and Loveland for the draft fans out there. For the people who are into that, throw some questions about those guys if you want to know. But let's see. Tyrod, I would probably, percentage chance to roll Tyrod next year. I'd probably put it at 80. I think 80% chance it's probably Tyrod. Right? I don't know. It's just, is that great? No, I don't love that it's Tyrod. I'd rather it be some rookie quarterback we could all get behind. I'm just not sure. I'm really not sure what to do at quarterback. I don't think Rodgers is the answer. The only experienced coach is Wilkes. That is not true, though, because they have Washington, right?
I think the perfect staff, everyone has to have been a former head coach. That's how you win a Super Bowl.
Well, and reading Washington, if you look at Washington's history, he's the only experienced coach, but ready? Eric Washington, the new defensive line coach, was a D-line coach at Northwestern from 2004 to 2007. He's a defensive line coach for the Bears in 2010, defensive line coach with the Panthers from 11 to 2017. The Panthers DC for 2 years, 18-19. The defensive line coach for the Bills. A defensive coordinator for the Bears. You're talking about a guy who was a defensive coordinator for multiple years and a D-line coach for the last 15 years or whatever it is. That's experience to me, right? What other experience do you want? He was literally a defensive coordinator. Unless again, you want all former head coaches, right?
But then if they were former head coaches, then the criticism would be that they got fired and they were a bad head coach. So I just don't know exactly what.
Yeah.
People
again, gun to your head right now. Do you want, and I'm not saying everybody's Arthur Smith who has experience, but Arthur Smith or whoever, I just blanked out on his name, all these freaking Engstrand. I would take the risk on Engstrand over Arthur Smith based on what I've seen from Arthur Smith the last couple of years, but he has experience, but I don't know. Hopefully there's a nice mix at the end of this. Again, I'm hoping they get some more senior consultants, specifically on offense, because I think they are lacking there, quarterback and offensive line coach with experience. And those are the two biggest positions on offense for me. So I do not love that. I'll be transparent. It just is what it is at this point. Being a New York Jet is nothing to brag about. Okay. let Wilkes call the defense. They've already confirmed that in the first press conference. He said, "I'm not calling the defense," so that's obviously great. Done with all the the phrases, yeah. Okay, I just keep going down, and then we'll get into some more of the coaching staff as well, right? Actually, I'll bring up another one before I even find the next chat. We went through Steve Wilkes, went through Eric Washington a little bit. Did we talk about Aaron Curry a little bit as well, right? The inside linebacker coach for the Steelers the last 2 years. He was a first round draft pick. Was it 2011? It was 9 or 11, right? He was a first round draft pick for the Seahawks. He busted out. Only was in the NFL for a few years, but has experience, obviously. Has been, again, a linebackers coach for the Steelers for the last couple of years, and they've been, they're kind of like a linebacker factory a little bit with the Steelers. But yeah, any other info on Aaron Curry, the new linebackers coach, as I kind of scroll down and find some chats?
Yeah, I mean, another one who kind of is a little more raw, but has the former playing experience. Because prior to being the Steelers linebackers coach the last 2 years, 2 years he was just a assistant, kind of not with a specific role with Seattle. He was at UNC Charlotte before that. But it just kind of fit into this overall theme of former players that this staff has, and that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but it's just something that is a noteworthy trend across these hires. I think now with it was 7 of the first 9 or something like that the last time I checked. I don't know what it is at this point, but it was definitely pretty overwhelmingly former players as of at least a couple of hires ago.
Yeah.
Oh, there's also did we get into like Chris Harris?
I was just going to say, let's go with the rest of the defense a little bit. We have Chris Harris, who I know his numbers with the Titans in terms of their pass defense the last couple of years have been really good. And can anybody in the chat name me any secondary players on the Titans? Like, they don't really have players, and they produced really, really well there. I know that he was tops in yards, but the touchdowns, he was like 20th or whatever. But still, considering the talent they have on that team, I really like Harris. Now, the only thing with Harris, and I brought it up on Twitter, was like, so I believe he was DB's coach and pass game coordinator for the Jets. Is that a little bit too much on his plate? I would personally like to see a cornerback safeties coach come in and be like the assistant to him. I don't want one guy handling pass game coordinator, safety coach, and cornerbacks coach all in one. I think it's too much on a guy's plate.
Although the only thing is, I don't know if did they officially announce him as DB's coach and passing game coordinator, because he did that in Tennessee, but I don't know if the team officially, like, I don't think the Jets put out an announcement about it yet. And when I saw that the reports of him being hired, it was just they're bringing him on to the staff. I don't know if that's official yet, that he's holding the same roles that he did last year.
Yeah, if so, I think it's a little bit too much. I prefer to have an extra hands on deck there. I would love, that Tony Odom came back. Obviously he didn't, but what are some of the stats you have on Chris Harris and some of his pass game numbers? I think he's been in their DB secondaries coach for, it was 2 years, 3 years, something like that.
Yeah,
or am I mistaken?
Years.
2 years. Okay.
Yeah. When I saw that come up as a possibility, I liked it because I knew the Titans' pass defense was good last year. It was, obviously the Titans were a bad team, but that was the one facet of the game where they were actually pretty solid. So I like it in that regard. Another former player, he's not the recent Chris Harris, that was the Broncos corner, but he was a really successful safety in the league before that. So yeah, I mean, it's just hard sometimes. Like, he coached a successful unit, but was he actually a good coach? We don't really know. Maybe he'll come here and not be great at all. But I think when you're looking at some of these assistant coaching hires, maybe more so than in terms of building a new staff with a new head coach, it might be more worthwhile to look at some of the trends across all of the hires, more so than, how good is this guy? How good is that guy? Because we just don't really know how good they are. But you can kind of notice trends. And I think the former player trend is definitely something that is very noteworthy about this staff. A lot of former players. So I think
the Lions were built like that too, though, right? I believe.
Yeah. And I think, like, what is the value of that? The Jets play in a big market. with a lot of attention. They have a lot of talented young players who haven't won yet. They've maybe had some off-field social media drama. So like maybe having all these former players can help them relate to some of the guys already in this building and try to help them get more out of their talent. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some benefits to it, but it also doesn't automatically make you a great coach, because you could be a good coach without playing. We all know that. So, but
Bill
that is an
Belichick.
interesting theme. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually kind of went through all the actually we have two more hirings to talk about and we'll go through the chat. There's a bunch of chats I want to get to. I'm 40 minutes behind the chat and we have 50 minutes left in the live stream. So we'll get to all the chats. But Chris Banjo is another coach, highly recommended by Sean Payton, right? Another guy who played in the NFL. So sticking with that theme, I know the Broncos. He's been the assistant special teams coach the last 2 years, and the Broncos special teams has been pretty damn good. And he was it wasn't Sean Payton. It was highly recommended by Mike Westhoff, and maybe Mike Westhoff will be a guy who's some type of assistant on the Jets staff, senior special teams consultant, whatever it may be. But to me, like all this stuff is so hard to know. If you get the stamp of approval from Mike Westhoff, who is a notoriously hard worker and takes his job very, very seriously, I think that's a thumbs up for me with Banjo if you're getting Mike Westhoff's stamp of approval.
Yeah, I like the Banjo hire. I mean, he played a big role in a massive turnaround for that special teams. The Broncos special teams was very low ranked for like 2 decades in a row. And then the last 2 years, they were the best in the league cumulatively in terms of DVOA rankings. And that's obviously not all Banjo. They hired a new coordinator. Mike Westhoff was there, got some new players. But just the fact that he was a part of that is encouraging to me, because that's what you're taking on when you go to the Jets, the longest playoff drought in the league, trying to create success. So I like that they've hired some coaches here, specifically with Glenn at the top, but also with Banjo, who have experience with bottom to the top rises. They started with something that was all the way at the bottom and then found ways to develop it to being successful, not just being a part of winning, but being a part of creating the winning culture. So I like that he was a part of that. Stamp of approval, like you said, from Westhoff and Sean Payton. That's another theme throughout the staff, is the Sean Payton influence. That's definitely something. And, going to the GM and Muji, something we've seen pretty consistently across this entire new staff and regime here.
Yeah, so and we'll talk about Muji now, because I think we've kind of been through the whole staff, and again, there'll obviously be more additions to it, but another guy who rose up the ranks, right? They got rid of their front office. He stuck around. He was in a lower role, got promoted like immediately by Sean Payton and Patton, right? And then it took another step the next year. So you have a guy who was a holdover, who I think in 2 years back to back he was promoted, and now he's highly recommended by Sean Payton, highly recommended by Patton. I believe is there sometimes with Kevin O'Connell with him, I believe as well. I think he's his quarterback, right? Or he's like a freshman and he was a senior playing tight end or whatever it was. So guy who's a part of a turnaround, again, who's highly recommended by a good GM, or at least thought to be a good GM, maybe a little bit more to prove. Sean Payton, who's a great coach. It seemed like what's his face Newmark was a lock at first, that he was gonna be brought in with Glenn, and it was like, hey, he's not hired yet, they're bringing in other guys for interviews, like what the hell is going on? So what was your thought process kind of on like Newmark versus Muji versus Brown? I know we slacked a little bit, and you said you weren't a big fan of Trey Brown's like resume, and you like Muji more, but Muji versus Newmark, what were your thoughts on that whole kind of process there?
Well, I did like that all of the finalists were from scouting backgrounds. I wasn't a huge fan of going the route of like a Hallaby or Greenberg or some of those guys who weren't scouting background. They were maybe like cap or analytics or things like that, because I think scouting background is the best place to come from as a GM. And if you look at all the best ones in the league, the majority of them are scouting background guys. There are a couple exceptions, but it's mostly, they started as a scout, worked their way up, then they were director of player personnel, assistant GM, things like that. So I think they got to a good pool of finalists. It's as we've said throughout this, always hard to know just like exactly how good they are or anything when you're not actually a GM. But it was interesting that report came out a couple days ago, and it was Tony Pauline, so we don't know like how valid it is, but he claimed that people at the Shrine Bowl were telling him that the Jets dodged a bullet by not hiring Newmark, but that Muji is has a great reputation and people think he's going to be great. So we'll see. They said that about Joe Douglas. Maybe Joe Douglas will still be a great GM, or maybe he was, and Jets had
Based
bad
on the
coaching.
resume,
I
how
don't
do you
know.
know with Douglas?
But
Like Douglas had a great resume.
yeah, so we just don't know. But
Yeah, exactly.
my main takeaway from all that is I do think they boiled it down to a good pool of candidates based on background. Just looking at what has worked around the league, I think they gave themselves the best odds that they could by boiling it down to scouting background candidates.
Another super chat. Double R. A-Rod and Adams restructure with pay cuts, trade or draft a young quarterback to sit and learn for one season. JJ Fields, we will be contender and rebuild. I'm out on Fields. Like it's just, I don't think he's great. To be completely transparent, like he's exciting, but do I think he's the future of the Jets quarterback position? No. And then JJ, are the Vikings really going to pay Sam Darnold? I think if I was a Vikings fan personally, I would want them to move on from Darnold and move forward with a young quarterback just because of the ceiling. Like Sam is kind of a guy who seems to fold under pressure, and his last couple of games with the Vikings were not great. So maybe they keep him, but I lean towards them probably keeping JJ McCarthy. Now I am with you, draft a young quarterback, sit and learn. And I don't really know where I stand on it because I haven't watched these guys enough, but I'm okay with trading a first round pick next year to go up and get Cam Ward if they like him. I'm not saying that I like him or anything like that because I haven't really watched him enough to say that. Whether it be Dart in the late first or second, or again, Milrow or McCord or whoever we're talking about. I think those are like the consensus, 3, 4, and 5 quarterbacks. I'm leaning towards like draft the quarterback, but I don't want Fields, right? And I don't think JJ is going to be available. But are you out on the Fields thing, or would you like to? Because you also have Jordan Travis as well, so it's kind of a stacked up quarterback room. I don't love the idea of Fields.
I mean, I think the Fields concept is just the idea that you could add some conceivable upside to the room, and the fact that Tyrod's pretty injury prone. He probably wouldn't play all 17 games. And I think Fields is, obviously he hasn't come close to what his ceiling was coming out, but he's probably one of the 32 best quarterbacks, maybe like 30 to 35, something like that. So he is like, I guess, a high end backup. And considering Tyrod would probably miss some games, like he's worth having for that. And the fact that he's 25, like there's some chance that he can maybe improve. He was a little bit more efficient this past season, but I think I would be on board just in that sense. If you're going to need a backup behind Tyrod, unless you're really confident in Travis's health and ability to perform this year, you are going to need another backup. So at least with Fields, there's some sort of upside. And I think as far as backups go, he's probably high up on that list. So I would be into him in that sense, but I also don't think he should preclude you from targeting a quarterback in the draft if there's someone you like.
That's my concern. It's like you get Fields and then you do draft a quarterback in, let's say, the second or third round, and then your room is, Tyrod, Fields, second or third round guy, and Travis. Like it's a little bit crowded. Now if you're going to tell me that they don't draft the quarterback, they don't land anybody in the draft, then okay, I'm cool with Fields, but I'd rather go draft, have that guy be the backup. If that's not the case, then okay, I'm okay with Fields, because like you said, in terms of upside as a backup, like who are you going to find in the NFL that has more of like an not upside as a backup, or just like a ceiling as a backup? Like there's not many guys who are young 25-year-olds who were high, first round draft picks who are backups right now. So yeah, I would take them if they didn't get a guy in the draft, but I prefer to get a guy in the draft and let it be a three quarterback room, because I don't want to bring too many guys into there. Kelvin says thoughts on Will Howard. I think I've watched like 2 or 3 games of him in passing as I was watching other guys. I wouldn't mind it. I don't think Will Howard has the highest ceiling in the world. I don't think that he has a upper or even like a above average NFL arm. I think he's a below average arm. And his accuracy, like I see him spraying passes quite often. So I think his mind and his feet are kind of good. But in the NFL, you need arm power and you need accuracy. And I think he lacks in those areas. And that's a huge concern, right? Like that's pretty much where you start out with quarterbacks. Like, okay, power, accuracy, right? Like those are number 1 and 2 that you want to check off. And I don't think he necessarily checks off those boxes. So I think he's like a high upside backup truly in the NFL. Never talking about like Dart versus McCord versus whoever, Milrow, story for a different day. I haven't watched those guys enough to know. But I have watched Howard in passing. I was thinking about doing some quarterback reviews, but when you start getting into that, then I'm going to watch Ward, then it's going to be McCord, and then it's going to be
it's just
Dart,
hard. Like
and
you
then
don't
it's
know,
gonna
like
be
is it
Sadur.
for nothing? We don't know if the Jets are even going to remotely consider that.
Exactly. And it's a lot of work. Like you really got to pay attention during quarterback ones. I'm not saying I don't pay attention to cornerbacks or whatever, but
There's
it's a lot
just so
of
much
brain
more
power.
context and like variables that you got to look at versus like just man on man.
And
With a lot of
the
other
thing
players.
is, like, can you just watch one? If I just watch one, I'm gonna want to watch the other 4, and then I don't have the time for 5 quarterbacks. I can't. Loyalty is great, but Saleh was making football decisions based on how much he liked the guy. Kind of to Nani's credit, like talking about the nepotism of just like hiring guys he knows and bringing in familiar faces and never really holding guys accountable. And like I think people maybe overstate calling players out in the media, but you also don't have to go out of your way to praise Michael Clemens consistently when he's been sucking ass, and you jumping on the top of piles and stuff. It's like, and Saleh goes like, "Oh, I think he's trying really hard. He's great." It's like, what are you talking about? Obviously, you jump on the pile after, that was with Ulbrich, but still, that's a guy. Honestly, Ulbrich. You watch his press conference a little bit with the Falcons. He's hard to root against. I have no ill will towards Ulbrich. I think we said at first, like, hey, he's coming as an interim and he's going to be DC and head coach. Like that's a bad decision. And then he acknowledged that months later. He's like, that I didn't delegate, and that was my fault. So to be fair, I feel like Saleh and Ulbrich's demand for mediocrity rubbed off on the players. Their coaches patted everyone on the back, no matter how. Yeah, no, that's like exactly. There was no accountability. He was a rah guy, but when it actually came to holding guys accountable, he didn't do it. And I think players walked all over him. Like he was their friend. He wasn't necessarily their coach. And I'm not saying to not be their friend, but coach comes first, right? And I think that's what Aaron Glenn will do. He's going to be hard on you. There was an example. I forget what player it was, but they said like he went to Aaron Glenn's house to watch film. So I think he'll be your friend if you're not going to fuck around, basically, for lack of a better term. But he's going to be a coach first.
There's a balance to it. And it almost feels like maybe the Jets overcorrected coming off of Gase, because you're coming off a guy in Gase who had no relationship with the players whatsoever. I mean, how many times was Sam Darnold just sitting alone on the bench? So you go from that to, then you go to Saleh, who is, seems like he goes to bat for the players to an extent that you rarely see from coaches. And that's good. You need to do that. But there does come a line that, when you're crossing it, it's dangerous. Like you said, it's one thing to say in the press conference that it's great that Michael Clemens jumps on the pile, but then you back that up by continuously playing him, showing that the words that he's saying in the press conference actually reflect kind of that belief in the player. So there is a line when you're going too far with it. So they went from no personality to loves the players. Mm-hmm. Hopefully Aaron Glenn could strike a really positive balance there to where he's not Bill Belichick. And, obviously it worked for Bill Belichick, but in today's day and age,
the last thing you want Aaron Glenn to be is Bill Belichick.
The last thing,
do not be him.
Awful. Brian Flores, maybe that's a better comparison. Like the recent years of Brian Flores was trying to be Belichick. Like that's what Ryan Fitzpatrick criticized him of. Yeah, is trying to emulate that, and it got to a fault where he was straining relationships, and then that leads to you cycling coordinators. Players don't like you, and they bad mouth you in the media, and all that. That is, the negative end of that spectrum. But then you also don't want to be Robert Saleh. Like there should be a degree of accountability, and it doesn't necessarily have to be shouted from the hilltops to the media, but it should be reflected in the decisions that are made with the roster and the playing time and all that. So hopefully he can strike a good balance between those two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, like even like Will McDonald struggled at certain points this year just with mental lapses. Like how many times did the dude line up off sides and he still like bench him for a series or something like that? Like some guy, they just need to be held accountable. Rob V says, thank God Blewett and Nani actually get it. It's about long-term success and sustainability, not just 1 year with Aaron Rodgers. I'm not going to read the rest, but yeah, it's about again, what I like a 10-win season, like understand, and I know there's obviously fans who are older than me, but I've had season tickets been going to at least 5, 6, 7 games a year since I've been since 2007 probably, but I've had season tickets since like 2012. Like I would love a 10-win season just into wild card, but I want a successful 26, 27, 28. I just don't think it's worth it with Rodgers. That's just my personal opinion. It's up to Curly. Rob B kind of mentions that he's saying this to other people and didn't agree. Again, I'm okay with people fan how they want to fan. If you want to root for a 10-win season, I just think that if you root for the 10-win season this year and we get it, I just think that 26, 27, 28 are going to be negatively impacted, where I rather just pull the Band-Aid off now. Like that's how I am. And I don't have a solution necessarily, but I don't think he is the solution either though. So to me, my solution right now would be to draft a young quarterback, prioritize a quarterback, whether that be trading back in the first, trading up from the second to the first, getting one in the, somewhere in the second, whatever it may be. I want a quarterback in the first 2 rounds. Like that's kind of where I stand. Let him develop for an entire year behind Tyrod. I'm completely cool with that. And then move forward. I just don't see what's the point of winning 10 games with Aaron Rodgers, even though it would be nice. You're sitting at pick 20. And then what do you do at 20 next year? Then we're going to be sitting with our hands up like, oh, okay, so now we don't have a quarterback. We're at pick 20. Then what do? We trade up from 20 to 3? What happens if those teams, all the top 3 teams want quarterbacks? They say, no, screw the Jets. We don't want your picks. We want a quarterback. And then we're sitting there with a thumb in our ass. Like, what are we supposed to do? So, the 1-win season or the 1 winning season sounds nice, but can we not forget that we also went 5-11 with this guy last year, 5-12. It's not like we were 9-10 win team who just barely missed the playoffs. Like we sucked last year with Aaron Rodgers.
He's not an automatic solution. That's what last year taught us about this point of his career. He still can have great games. He's still one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league. Maybe, you could argue 15 to 20, wherever you want to put him, but what he is not is an automatic solution. So there's a lot of work to be done throughout the entire team. And considering that, you just have to, ask yourself the question of, is a slight, present day upgrade at quarterback worth all of the other implications that may affect the development of other aspects of the organization? So that's just kind of where my head is at.
Nandino kind of brings up a point like, hey, what about the new staff need a quarterback to help everyone buy in? If they win 8, 9, 10 games with Aaron Rodgers, or is Garrett Wilson like, oh, I'm so excited about the future with a 42-year-old quarterback? Like I think if you have a rookie and they build around him and they're seeing some progression, like that's more positive than winning a few games with Aaron Rodgers. Like what? Hey, Garrett Wilson's excited for 2026, 43-year-old Aaron Rodgers coming back, hopefully for another year. Like I don't think it instills confidence either way. Like, I don't think Rodgers is some solution where he comes in next year, we guarantee to win 11, 12 games with Rodgers. It's like, no, year older, year more of injuries, new offense, alienating Garrett Wilson. It's just, I'm over it. I'm done with the Rodgers experience. We tried it out. It didn't work. Pull the Band-Aid off, take a smaller cap hit, move on from Devontae, keep all that money to then guess what? Pay big free agents in 26, 27 that are not going to be able to afford if we keep Rodgers and Devontae on this team for 1 year of maybe winning an extra game or two. Like it's not necessarily worth it. And a Tyrod thing, like, yeah, he's gotten injured. Can we also remember with Tyrod that he got his lung punctured by a doctor with the Chargers, and that's why he didn't start at first there. Right. And then with the Giants, he was behind a absolutely dreadful offensive line with dreadful receivers and was consistently having to hold the ball and run around and stuff. It's not like he was with the Jets last year where Aaron Rodgers had all day to throw for quite a few games. He was playing with an absolutely dreadful Giants team and still pulled out some decent stats. So I think he's injury prone, but I think it also may be like a little bit overstated because of the amount of hits he's taking because of the teams he's played with. Just my opinion. So Joseph Patterson, what's good? It's been a while. Yeah, we're back at least bi-weekly for now, and then I'll up it to weekly as soon as it picks up a little bit. But losing has consequences. Guys like Garrett Wilson won't want to stay here for another dog shit season. Yeah, I get that, but again, if we win 9 games instead of 7, is it really going to impact them that much? I think the Jets throwing a fat check at him is going to be the biggest impact. And that's maybe what Moji does. And he actually kind of indicated, or not indicated, maybe indicated is a good word for it. But he said, like, hey, we want to keep our players here. So is that maybe an indication that he's going to sign Garrett Wilson in the sauce or something like that? I don't know. But I want to build around our players. So we'll see. Let's see. I'm tired of this narrative that we are a talented team. We have a huge amount of starters and depth to replace in our defense. We have talent in spots. I'm kind of in the middle on this one, right? I think you are too, Nanya. I don't think we're a barren wasteland of talent, but do we have positions we absolutely need to address? Defensive line, yes. We have one linebacker right now in Quincy Williams. What if Sherwood goes to the Falcons? We have pretty much nobody at safety right now. So you have no safeties, no tight ends. Questions at linebacker. You have they even have a tight end on the roster right now. I guess Rutgers are only rostered tight end. So they need quite a few things, but you still got Brees and Garrett and, Quincy, Q, McDonald. Like, it's not the 2019, 2020 Jets. So I'm kind of in the middle. They're not a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl anymore, but they have plenty of talent. If you told me, hey, the Jets are a 9-8 team next year with Tyrod, I don't think you're crazy. I think the Jets, if they can win 7 games with Zach Wilson, I think they can win 9 with Tyrod next year with actually competent coaching.
I think it's a top-heavy roster. Like, you have a lot of, 25 and under, or even you could go like 27 and under building block players who either are or have been among the best players at their position. But it's in between that where there's a lot of weaknesses, the depth of the roster and like middle of the line starters in some places, because, you have your sauces, Garrett Wilson. The offensive line has a lot of pieces now. Quincy Williams, Quinnen. So you have a lot of that top end talent, but it's, who's starting at safety? Who do you have at all at defensive tackle outside of Quinnen? Who do you have at receiver outside of Garrett? So it's just the depth of the roster, and can they find even just competent starters? Because I think that's what most Super Bowl teams are made up of. Like, you have some superstars at the top, that's important, but it's, can you fill as many spots as possible with someone who's at least solid, and minimize the number of positions where you're blatantly weak, because any one weakness on either side of the ball can be exploited to change a game. So I think it's about minimizing those, because the Jets, as talented as they have been the past 3 years with some of these superstars, you could beat them just by destroying one of their weak links on the offensive line, or exploiting the one thing they couldn't stop on defense, whether it was, gap runs, or a corner is out and you exploit whoever's in his place, or, whatever, or the safety position was a huge one for 2 years. That's the key. Like, can they fill out the, backbone of the roster? They have the top end talent, but they have to fill it out.
Yeah, like you said, a receiver too. There's nobody. There's no 2, 3, 4, anything like that. So they definitely have to build a lot of talent. And it's kind of like you look at offensive lines and people, it's not an analogy, but it's like, hey, would you rather have a bunch of just mid starters at offensive line, or like 2 Hall of Fame level players and 3 really bad guys? Like, give me the group of average guys versus the 2 guys who, again, like you said, with game planning, you could get around those 2 guys, load up the other side. Like, it's not, I'm not saying it's that easy, but it's not necessarily that complicated either. You could work against a terrible, right tackle, right guard, center. If the studs on the left side, well, then rush more on the right side. Put your better players on the right side. They're not going to move the offensive linemen around. So, Rob V and Curly are both kind of bringing up like, hey, after this year, they have to show improve it. And Curly said that his expectation is that we'll be here again in 3 years, which based on history, you're right. Like, it's based on the last 30, 40, 50 years of the Jets. Yeah, you have to lean that way, because they've broken our hearts so many times that I'm not going to get truly excited about stuff until they prove it to me on the field. And Aaron Glenn proves he's a good coach, and Muji proves that he's a good GM. I could say I'm optimistic though. Like, I like this hire. I like a decent amount of the staff they've brought in, but based on history, yeah, you can't. We're Jets fans. You can't be like, oh my God, we're gonna win it all. This is amazing, because we've been shit on for 20 years at this point. So, you're getting old when you're a year older than a Jets coach. I got a year on Chris Banjo. I don't know how old Chris. He's probably in his 40s now.
32, 33, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm older than some Jets players. That was the milestone that I passed. recently.
Dude, my first one with sports was like, oh my god, I'm as old as a rookie who's getting drafted now. Like I'm a rookie in the NFL. Like, oh, now I'm in prime NFL. Now I'm 31. I'm at the end of my prime now.
Yeah.
I'm now I'm gonna be the old man. You can't bring me if I'm a running back. You're not touching me. So
Nope. I should be coming
infrared.
up on my prime right now. I should be going for my first contract extension, or right about here is where I start like
What do you
going
26?
on Twitter and being like putting eyeballs like I want my extension, but I'm not getting it.
You just
So I gotta
unfollowed the
start like
Jets.
like make the wheels turn a little bit. Then I get my deal or I get traded. That's
20.
coming
You're
up soon.
26 now.
It's gonna be 25 in October.
Oh, 25. Oh, yeah. I would say like 25.
If I were
26,
drafted
27 is a good
21,
prime.
then I would depends on what age you are when you're drafted. Like NBA though, you're like middle of your career at this point.
Zach Rosenblad. It's you don't spell that right, but you suck. And with that being said, I'm out. Okay, thank you, Infrared. I had to make that point. I've seen Infrared in here before, I think, but he really hates that guy. I guess. I don't have a problem with Zach. Well, some of their articles are, I don't know, some of the hit pieces, which Woody Johnson actually addressed a little bit. He's like, a lot of that was exaggerated, but it's hard to really know. Charles London, QB coach, yeah. Jets coaching staff is awesome. Caden, Jets page, what's up? Why haven't we cut Clemens? Well, Aaron Glenn's first official move was getting rid of Keith Carter, right? Like that was his first stamp on the Jets was dumping Keith Carter. So bravo. But yeah, Clemens, and like Nadia said, in terms of like, attacking weaknesses on teams, like Michael Clemens should never be starting for you, like ever. That whole situation, the defensive line was just an absolute mess this year. So
it's the preseason we saw like, wow, that is an exploitable hole you can target in the Jets defense. And then just time and time again all year, just run an option play with the quarterback towards Clemens and it's easy money.
Yeah. Bernard says Tyrod's not lasting 17 games, which is fine. I would argue that Aaron Rodgers at this point might not make it either. At least healthy enough to be meaningful. Okay, let's see. You know how I'll know? Yeah, Curl. I'm completely with you. Again, I like the hire and I give it a thumbs up, but prove it to me first. Like I'm not gonna get overly excited. With that being said, did I order a $50 knockoff Aaron Glenn jersey? Yeah, but it's also so I can sport at a game. I don't care. Gun to my head, yeah. I don't want to say it. I don't want to put it in this bad of terms. Like that's not going to work out. But yeah, based on history, you're right.
Yeah,
we'll see.
That's fair.
The only thing about Nickel is when you can't stop the run the ball out. So I said that before, but the thing with that is Michael Carter is he's a good blocks player as well. Like he's willing to take on blocks. He's willing to get involved in the run game. So I don't think it's a thing where you have some light corner or nickel who's not gonna get involved in the run game. Michael Carter's plenty fine, in my opinion. Now it's not gonna be as good as a linebacker, but I could say the same thing. Well, hey, if we're going to run base all the time, then they're going to explore our linebackers in coverage. And who is the Jets linebacker 2 and 3 right now? Like, I'd rather have Michael Carter on the field than whoever linebacker 3 is going to be next year. But like Zaire Barnes,
yeah.
Who is it? I don't. Mosley's. Are you knowledgeable about Mosley's like contract situation? I go to it sometimes and it completely like jacks me up, but. Mosley was hurt all last year, massive contract hit. Like, what's our situation with Mosley and get rid of him? Because great leader and all that stuff, but I think it's time for him to go his separate ways, if not retire.
Yeah, he's still under contract, but I'm pretty sure that because of the restructures they've already done, that even if they were to cut him, I don't think they would get savings from it, if I'm looking at it correctly. But I just pulled up Spot Track, but if they did a post June 1st release, they would get $4 million in savings this year, but they would push 7.7 in dead cap to next year versus if they just stuck with them for 12.8 this year. So like, remember they already did that pay cut and restructure and they added those void years that go through 2028. So they kind of might be stuck with it if I'm looking at it correctly. I'm not the most elite cap person, but that's how it's looking to me on Spot Track.
Bernard Nixon saying, so you guys are saying that Rodgers is a bad teammate in terms of like him being polarizing. I don't think polarizing means bad teammate. I think he's a large presence, and he's like a leader for the team. And I think it's easier to establish your culture when you don't have a guy like that. What if he disagrees with Engstrand about plays, and then he talks to Garrett Wilson? I don't know. I thought Engstrand's calling this play. I think it's stupid. Like I rather not. I'm not saying he's a bad teammate necessarily. he's just a big voice in the room, and I'm not sure it's the right voice at this point at 42 years old. So that's it. I'm not saying he's a bad teammate. He's just polarizing, whether it be good or bad. And I would lean more towards he's a good teammate. I think a lot of the stories are overblown because of his past, but not something I would necessarily want. Tyrod, the Jets go 4-13. I would bet a lot of money that's not the case, honestly. With competent coaching, again, with bad coaching, the Jets won 7 games back-to-back years with Zach Wilson, and I would argue it, depending on how this free agency shakes out, maybe a worse roster. Like if we can win 7 with Zach, we're gonna win 4 with Tyrod. I don't see it. Rodgers went 5-12. Yeah. Bernard's kind of said, like, hey, we're gonna be bad with Tyrod. We were bad with Rodgers last year too. Like we won 5 games. Like, am I misremembering? Did we like barely miss the playoff something last year, or was it like one of the worst years ever?
Game against the Dolphins at the end of the year. Did you see that game?
Pats week 3 was the most exciting.
He has 500 career touchdowns.
Yeah. Yeah. It was terrible last year.
Biasy there is the way it ended at the end, because the week before that game against the Bills was one of the worst quarterback performances in the league in this decade. It was the worst QBR by any quarterback since Davis Mills in 2021. But because he followed that up with the Dolphins game, which was good, but obviously that was an exception in a 5-12 season. Now that is kind of, I think, changed the outlook going into the offseason, because that's the most recent thing. But if it ended after that Bills game, then I think it would be a different discussion. But it's whatever happened most recently that I think is the prevailing kind of influence.
Yeah. Tanner Engstrom was an OC for San Diego State for 7 years, so at least he's called plays for a number of years. Yeah, and again, he was involved in the passing.
He's with the DC Defenders too, the legendary Defenders,
coordinating, or at least part of one of the most prolific passing offenses in the league. I'm not saying it's going to work out. You have guys like Joe Douglas, who we were all praising. Every single Jets fan was, oh my God, Joe Douglas, got to get this guy, and he got fired. Like it's hard. It's really hard to know. We all wanted Saleh.
Yeah, he was my number one guy.
Impossible. Yeah, and I think it's a good hire, like based on his track record prior to coming to the Jets. I can't say terrible hire. They're idiots for ever hiring that guy, because we were all clamoring for him. It just didn't work out. And I think the main reason is holding players accountable. That's his, one of his biggest issues. So little Jets chant. Snead is on the Titans. Oh yeah, Snead. Okay, yeah. You're past him. I don't even know who's on the Titans secondary. But yeah, Snead is obviously great. Talking Fannin in the second. Fannin? I don't know who that is. Beast, and they put him in the slot. Yeah, I'm not, Rob. If you've been watching the show for a little bit, I'm more towards the top. Like I'm going to do 10 reviews on the top guys in the first round, and then I'll review guys after the Jets draft them. But I can't watch 40, 50, 60, 70 guys. There's just no way. People slept on the Titans. I believe it's official. I'm not sure what that means. Titans had a pretty good, nice defense, no offense. Okay. Other news, Sarah also stats Commanders blocked assistant quarterbacks coach David Blau.
Oh, yeah, I saw that earlier.
Okay. I didn't see that. Jets to draft the LSU O tackle, Will Campbell. All O-line is a priority. Yeah, like people are kind of crazy with this position with like, oh, they need this or they need that. At the top of the first round, a lot of the positions that at least I'm watching are needs for the Jets. Whether you like Tyler Warren, tight end, they need tight end. D tackle, Mason Graham, they need a D tackle. Will Johnson, oh my God, the Jets don't need another corner. Is having 3 great corners a bad thing? Like I'm completely fine with Will Johnson. They want to draft Will Johnson. McMillan, I'm not going to put my necessarily like thoughts on the player in there, but if you like McMillan and the Jets need a receiver. I don't love McMillan at 7 personally. And every draft is different, so you have to account for that. But he would be well below Drake London, well below Garrett Wilson. I would have him below Odunze last year, Malik Neighbors. So I think he's the best receiver in a bad receiver draft, at least up top. I was not impressed with McMillan. I'll just throw that out there. There you go. I saw a lot of Drake London, Mike Evans, and McMillan. What are your thoughts on him? Didn't really see a lot of nuance in his route running. I wanted to see more contested catch situations. I thought Drake London was a lot better route runner. I thought he was a lot better with his releases. McMillan's not great with his releases. I think he's probably a little bit more smooth than Drake London, but Drake London was a lot more physically dominant. So I would have London well above McMillan. And Mike Evans is more physically dominant, both of those guys. But McMillan's he's like a discount version of Mike Evans or Drake London. I'm not saying Drake London is Mike Evans, but yeah, I wasn't impressed. I wasn't overly impressed. I didn't see the route running. I want to see more contested catches, like him dominating and boxing guys out. Didn't see it. I just not super high on McMillan. I personally, for McMillan, I've watched McMillan, I've watched Warren, and the other two guys, Johnson and Graham. Out of those four guys, McMillan would be my least favorable out of those four for the Jets to take at 7. Rather have the other 3. I did not think I was going to want Warren. Warren, really high ceiling with Warren at tight end. Some of the plays he just takes off is mind-boggling, though. He'll just completely stop running a route and get the quarterback kind of in shitty positions. So keep running through the chat. Rather draft Tyler Warren or Mason Graham. For me, it's Graham over Warren because of his very high floor, in my opinion. But Warren has a really high ceiling because you're talking about 6'6", 250, 255, whatever he is. Good body control, good contested catcher, good yak. A lot of positions on that offense that he filled. But Graham, I think, is safely going to be a good player. I don't think his ceiling is crazy high, but still a really good, solid player. I think you're kind of locking in there. So. Warren, again, concerning with the little bit of lack of effort. Route running improved late, but you'll have that review out. I literally just finished today. Okay. AG playing undefeated. I don't know that. Undef. Parcells. What is it?
Probably just under.
Okay. Is the F next to the R? Oh, yeah, it's under it. Okay. Belichick will be invaluable on coaching a team. I don't know if he still talks to Belichick all the time. I know he still talks to Parcells every single week. So I'm sure after every game, Parcells is going to call him and say, "Hey, why'd you call this? Why didn't you take a timeout here?" Whatever it is. So I do like that Parcells he's not actually involved with the staffs, but he's quasi with the fact that he's going to give AG pointers and stuff like that. So Greg Rollo, I agree. Thank you very much. Let's see. Rodgers ain't collecting Social Security. He probably has 3 years left. Okay. Technically, if you want to play in the NFL for 3 more years, could he? Yes, but is year 2 and 3 of that going to look like, Matt Ryan with the Colts or Phillip Rivers with the Colts or Big Ben in his last couple of years with the Steelers? Yeah, I think it's coming relatively soon. I'm late. How do we feel about Charles London? That's a quarterback's coach, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would say not.
We were kind of lukewarm on it.
Yeah,
definitely. I kind of like that they went the veteran route instead of a younger guy.
Yeah.
But just looking at the resume, there's not really much you could point to and say, "Oh, he was a part of this success." So, just not. Obviously, there's something there that Glenn likes, that the team likes, but the resume doesn't really jump out at you.
That really, it wasn't the direct quote, Nania, but that was very close to the Jets must know something that we don't know in the draft. I would say realistically, this is my least favorite hire. Charles London. I would say that's my least favorite. And the second least favorite is probably the offensive line coach, but I'll give the benefit of the doubt with the offensive line coach that Aaron Glenn was there with him, saw him work. Obviously the Lions blocking at tight end and offensive line in general was really good. So he had some part in that. So I like him more than London. I don't love London. I'll be transparent there. So McCord or Leonard can be picked up late 4th. Talking about quarterbacks, safety, right tackle, D tackle. I would say that receiver and tight end are the other of the top 5 biggest needs, right? You literally do not have a tight end right now. There's not a tight end rosterable on the roster unless we are still standing Jeremy Rucker because he's from 2 hours north of me or whatever he is. He's been dreadful. So yeah, they don't have a tight end either. So definitely put that in receiver unless you have some faith in Xavier Gibson or Corley being the number 2, which I personally do not. Tell Garrett Wilson to speak to McLaurin about wanting to build a team. Yeah. McLaurin is now happy. That's who are you rooting for in the Super Bowl now? Because this is I really don't even know, because I would say the Eagles, The problem with the Eagles is I hate their fan base. I hate their fan base. They're the nastiest fans in the NFL and in sports in general. I would like Barkley to win one to hurt Giants fans, but I don't want to see the revisionist history on Becton. And oh my God, Becton went from the situation of the Jets to winning a Super Bowl. I can't root for Becton to win a Super Bowl either. So I guess I'm still kind of towards the Eagles, but like I don't really know if the Chiefs have already won. They won 3 in Mahomes' first 5 years, right? Or they're at 3 going for 3 in a row, correct? Yeah. I believe that's what it is. So that they would be at 4 Super Bowls. What's 3 versus 4? You know, like, doesn't even matter at this point. They're gonna get calls. Like, I really don't even know who I'm rooting for in the Super Bowl. So, do you have a preference which way you're leaning on this?
I don't know. It's definitely not strong either way at this point. I kind of lean Philly. I think the Chiefs are pretty annoying at this point. Yeah. But like you said, the Becton aspect of it is kind of pushing me away just because I don't want to hear it more than anything. But I don't know. I like Super Bowls are better when there's a good hero versus villain. I think I've said this last show or whatever. But like if Washington had won and they were playing Kansas City, that makes it easy. Or vice versa. If it was, no, Buffalo, that wouldn't be easy either. But or some other team. If Houston made a ridiculous run to the Super Bowl, I don't know. But this one makes it pretty difficult. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of just watching it.
Mark saying, what do you guys know about Travis Jordan? I'm assuming this is Jordan Travis, right? Unless I don't know if there's a Travis Jordan in the draft. Maybe there is, but I'm going to take this as Jordan Travis. I know that he had a massive injury. I know that there was rumors about the Jets not even thinking he might be ready for the start of next year. I know he lacks accuracy. I know that he lacks arm power. I don't think he's like a high upside guy. It's not like some guy in the 3rd or 4th round who's a really high ceiling. I think Jordan Travis's ceiling is mid at best, like at the very best. I don't really see it with Travis. I don't love the pick, but nonetheless, Jay says number 8, old dog to learn new tricks. Exactly. It's been his way too long to change at 42. Like, is he going to change now in terms of like wanting the offense to be a certain way and changing the plays of the line? I don't think it's the best situation for an OC to walk
behind into. That he essentially forced Nathaniel Hackett to be the offensive coordinator, and the Jets, reaped the benefits of that. So I don't. It's optimistic to say like Rodgers will do all of these things. He'll take a pay cut. He'll learn a new offense, but it didn't happen for 2 years while he was here. So why would he do it now? So I don't know.
Yeah. I guess you can answer this one. It was relatively simple. I could probably answer it, but what happened to Ben Blessington? Says that boy.
He's missing. I don't know.
Milk cartons.
He's just MIA. Milk cartons. All that.
I believe he went into. I think he went for a hike with his dog somewhere in like Washington, in the woods, and I don't think he's ever been. Nobody's ever really heard from. I'm not really sure. We're hoping that he, returns safely to home, but he's missing right now. Ben is the
last time we heard from him was when he vouched for Arthur Smith as the Jets head coach. Ever since that, he's just been off the grid.
Now, Curly, I don't know if I'm just not informed and I'm just an idiot. The next Halley's Comet sighting, I don't know how often do we see Halley's Comet? Do we know how often this is? When's the next one coming? The Jets playoffs.
I don't have a lot of astronomical knowledge of astronomy. Not familiar.
Yeah. But I'm gonna Google Halley's Comet as I ask you.
That's what I'm
gun
doing.
to your head right now.
72 to 80 years, it appears.
Yeah, but when was the last one though? Because
2061 is the prediction for the next one.
2061.
I'm gonna lock it in. The Jets will get one before that.
Now lock this in. When is the year the Jets will make the playoffs? If you really had to bet,
the playoffs?
If you really like, this was you have $40,000 on this bet right now. You had to do it for whatever reason. When's the year the Jets make the playoffs?
I'll say 26.
Okay,
that would put them 1 year behind the Bills drought, right? Because we're at 14 or 2 years. Because next year we're making 15, right? And the Bills were 17.
Yeah,
I'll say Aaron Glenn's second year. I'll go with that.
I'm with that. And like, if you actually prior to Gase and Saleh, every time we hired a head coach, at least for those couple of years, it was like first time head coach makes the playoffs as a winning record, with the Jets. I think Herm did it. I think Mangenius did it. I think Rex did it, and then Bowles went 10-6 when we make the playoffs. So it's possible he comes in here and we win 9 games, make the wild card this year. But yeah,
I almost want to say this year, but just saying in 2 years is just my balance between optimism and just what history says is likely to happen. But yeah, because I don't think they're as far off as it might seem, because we know the close game losses and the high end talent that they have. Can coaching win you more of those close games if it is a good coaching staff, which we don't know. So I could see it this year, and there were multiple turnarounds like this in the league last year with Washington, with the Chargers, Denver. Multiple of those teams had first-time head coach, or not first-time head coaches, but new hires at head coach. So I could see it this year, but I'm just going to play it safe and go 26.
I would say 26 is my first guess. 27 is my second. 25 being my third. In terms of likely, I think they're more likely to not make it this year, but nonetheless, Jay Spector says Philly versus Taylor Swift, lose either way. It's Philly. It's really Philly fans and Becton versus Taylor Swift, Kelsey, Mahomes flopping now, which I don't love Mahomes flopping, and the refs. So there's a lot of bad on the Chiefs side again with all of those, but Philly fans suck, dude. Like, I think one of my first exposure to seeing how bad they suck was David Wright got hurt in the playoffs versus the Phillies, and they cheered. Big Ben was getting carted off the field one game against the Eagles, and they were pouring beer on him, getting carted off. It's like they are just beyond trashy. And then did you see the video of that one guy talking to he was behind the kid and his girlfriend, and he's like, "Oh, your girlfriend's a ugly CUNT," and he kept saying it, and then they actually found him. Yeah, they found him on social media, and then he lost his job. He was something with it wasn't mental health. It was like something with he should probably be a nice guy to have that job, and he just sitting behind him was like, "Your girlfriend's ugly." It's like, oh my god, dude, so aggressive.
Yeah, the thing that sticks out to me, Philly fans, is there's this game last year. Obviously, this isn't like the revelation of it. I was aware, but I always think about this game last year against the Cardinals. In I think it was week 17, but they were struggling a little bit, but they were still 11-4. Yeah, I think 11-4 at that time. But it was just they were tied or winning by a touchdown, but the fans were booing and borderline rioting because they're having a so-so game despite being a great team. It's their standards are ridiculous. And if they don't win this game, they'll probably trash the city for not winning, even though it's Jets fans would love to win 11 games every year and lose 2 Super Bowls, and you don't want to lose 2 Super Bowls, but we would love to see the playoffs, let alone win 2 conference titles in 3 years. So yeah.
Let's see. Connor Long, our own. Would you guys trade Jordan Travis for Hendon Hooker straight up? Hooker was with the Lions, right? He got drafted there, and was it the third round in? I think it was the third or fourth round in 2023. He has experience with the Lions staff, so I would say, why not? Is he healthy?
He's healthy. Just him being healthy. Right, I just pulled him up. Yeah, he was the 3rd round pick in 23.
Early 3rd or late 3rd? I think he was
68th. So
okay, early. Yeah,
early. He's 27 though. Wow, that's a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, probably. But John Nolte says, what do you think the chances of Rodgers returning? Nani, I put it at 80-20, and I put it at 70-30.
I think maybe I'll go 75-25. The press conference increased it for me. I was maybe 60-40 pre-press conference, but kind of the vibes of that maybe upped it by 10 to 15%.
Curly saying, you mean the teams that hired proven coaches had a turnaround? I'm not sure exactly what you're talking to about that, but didn't the Lions just hire a unproven coach?
So they tight end should have hired Matt Nagy or Arthur Smith.
Who was the answer then, Curly? And I don't know. I would say Curly tends to lean more negative. I don't have any problem with Curly. I think we actually have some good conversations sometimes. But who was your answer then? Who was a proven head coach you wanted? Again, Mike McCarthy. I'm not Mike McCarthy. I think has historically underachieved. Even though he's a good winning record and all that stuff, he's had really good teams, and he never really makes it that far with them. Arthur Smith, Ron Rivera, Rex Ryan. Like, it wasn't a pool of guys who I necessarily wanted. Dan Campbell was a first time, head coach, and that's who we just robbed, that team, because they've been really successful. Like, there's plenty of coaches who have been successful their first time. Sean McVay, I'm sure people are like,
Kevin
what the hell, this
O'Connell,
guy's.
Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Sean
Yeah,
McDermott, John Harbaugh, Mike
Kyle
Tomlin,
Shanahan,
D'Amico Ryans, Kyle
yeah,
Shanahan. So
yeah, like how many teams? Like,
there's
that's that.
plenty of examples.
All the top teams in the league, or look at what's his face in Philly. He was a first time head coach. He didn't really come out of anywhere. Like, I would say most of the coaches in the NFL who have really good teams right now were at one time first time head coaches. Like, you gotta get it right. Do you like, to me, Mike McCarthy? Yeah, another like safe hire, but I just feel like their ceiling is capped with him. He never really wins much. And I get me saying like that as a Jets fan who hasn't won anything. Like, oh, like, who are you to overlook McCarthy? But having Rodgers, having the Cowboys, I feel like they haven't. He just disappoints every year, in my opinion, based on the talent he has on the roster. So, go KC Chiefs dynasty with hearts and rings. That's a little bit much to go to. If you're rooting for them, fine. I can't do the hearts, and you should actually have 4 Super Bowl trophies there, right? It's 4 and it would be 4 in 6 years, but 3 in a row from Mahomes, right? 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. That is ridiculous if they win. Like, it is crazy though that a lot of the players now are starting to talk about it. Like, hey, we knew we were coming into KC. We knew what we were facing with the refs. Like, people in the NFL are really starting to speak out about how bad that is. And now you have Mahomes like fake running out of bounds and shit, and then keep running and getting like, he's running out of the pocket and sliding and he's getting hit. Yeah, once you're out of the pocket, you're a running back, you're a receiver, you're a tight end. There's no different. But Mahomes gets those calls. It's been brutal. Big Hendon Hooker guy. Yeah, I would take Hooker over Travis. Did I do a film review on Hendon Hooker? No. But based on what I watched with Travis, I'll take him. Cap ramifications, yes. NFL breakdowns, we don't know what they're talking about. Thank you for giving specific examples. NFL breakdowns. Thank you for that argument. You really killed it. I'm sure he disagrees about something stupid, but it's okay. You got to give an argument. You got to say what I don't know about, and then why, and then prove to me that you know what you're talking about. Because I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that guy does not know what he's talking about. Sack Kermit 10 times. I would love to think of the safe hires, Dimitroff and McCarthy or Gruden. Can somebody explain to me what Gruden has done in the last 20 years? Gruden went to the Raiders, sucked ass.
He's very safe. He sucked with the Raiders for 3 years and got fired because he was racist. That's very safe.
Yeah, he was good 20 years ago, and then was recently fired and completely disappointed, and then got in trouble with the Raiders. Like, why Gruden? And again, McCarthy is a guy who has underperformed throughout his career, in my opinion, based on the teams he's had. So yeah, I'd rather take a chance than Mike McCarthy, or like, again, Gruden. Like, I don't understand the Gruden thing. Why not bring back Rex at that point? Gruden had success in the mid 2000s, early 2000s. Rex at least had success in 2010 and 11. That was closer. Why not bring? I'd rather bring Gruden. What is the Gruden love? I don't understand the Gruden stuff. I guess it's because he Spider Y2 banana and shit. He's funny with bars.
He was funny as a Monday Night Football announcer.
He's done absolutely nothing in 2 decades. Gruden, McCarthy. Okay, I understand it. It's just such a lukewarm hire to me. Where I think Glenn has a lower floor than McCarthy does, but a higher ceiling. Also not. And again, we're gonna get out of here because we don't. We're over our time. But then they should have hired a proven GM with the first time head coach for a change. Nani, what's the stat you have about proven GMs being hired? There's okay, so we brought up with coaches in terms of them being first time guys, and it's most of those guys are the coaches who are at the top tier right now. Same thing with GMs. You look at all the GMs in the NFL, and Nani gave plenty of examples the other day, and you can give more examples if you want, but like top 8 or 9 of the top 10 teams in the NFL were all inexperienced GM first time hires. So yeah, you gotta take swings. I didn't hate Dimitroff, but there's like 2 guys in the NFL who are retreads at GM who are successful right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you look at the list of the top GMs, it's almost entirely first-time GMs. I mean, you could go through the list of some of the top teams in the league, whether it's DaCosta with the Ravens, Bean with the Bills. You could just go down the line. I have the whole article on it. All the names aren't at the top of my head, but I came up with the list of like the consensus top 9 or so GMs in the league, and every single one of them was a first-time GM who had not held the role previously before their current team. So
Mhm.
Even more so than head coach, I think a second-time GM is unappealing because teams want to hold on to a GM for a long time. I think they get more rope than head coaches, and they tend to last longer. So I think it's more of a red flag if you're not available if you're not currently employed as a GM, but you were previously.
Yeah, so need a first-time head coach, need a first-time GM, kind of like it's based on history, and teams are successful now. That's kind of the formula is. I think I figured out this NFL breakdowns guy. If you look at the colors of those two symbols right there, the yellow and the green, and he's saying bring back Rodgers and he'll win 11 games because the Jets were plenty successful with Rodgers this year. It was great. We should just do it again. Why not? So yes, thank you, Packers fan, Rodgers fan. Curly, this will be the last one we'll get out of here. What makes you think Woody can hit a home run worth the swing? I don't think he necessarily hit a home run worth the swing, but did we hate Saleh? Did we hate Douglas? Like, we would have both signed up for them. He had his successful years in 2000s. He hired Rex Ryan. We were a sniff away from the Super Bowl multiple times. Like, it is what it is what it is. Like, yeah, I don't necessarily have faith either, Curly. I'm not going to say like I have blind faith in these hires, but based on what Nania said and the track record of successful teams, it is a first-time head coach. It is a first-time GM. So we have to take swings on the guy that we like and look at the resume. And you look at Aaron Glenn's resume, and it's Peyton, and it's Belichick, and it's Campbell, and it's Parcells. Like, it's a good resume to bet on. Where I'm not like, I don't want McCarthy to just go out and be disappointing every year and maybe win 9-10 games, which again, I know it's kind of crazy for me to turn my nose at that, but it just, you got to take a risk at a certain point. You got to take a risk. So, okay. All right. Yeah, I think we're good. Packers fans still going to argue, and I don't know why I can't even. I'm not going to say that, but nonetheless. Nania, anything coming out soon? I know you're going to do probably an article now on a quarterbacks coach, London or whatever. But anything coming up that you want to promote? CYJ, is that coming out anytime soon? I know you said you're kind of doing it when you feel it's necessary, but.
Well, I'm definitely going to do a breakdown on Engstrand's potential offense, and we don't know what that'll look like. But just like I did the article with Wilkes and his previous scheme and personnel tendencies, I'm going to do one on Engstrand and what the Lions' offense looked like in terms of personnel packages and play action and motion, shotgun, all that different stuff. And try to project what it might look like with the Jets. That's next in line. But after that, I mean, we're in February already, free agency next month. So probably going to start ramping up the free agency stuff soon. But we always got plenty of stuff coming.
Yeah, plenty of stuff. Like I said, I'm 4 reviews deep out of the draft guys. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll have a lot of knowledge about what I want the Jets to do. In the first round, you'll have some Jets player reviews. You'll have free agent reviews. So I'm working behind the scenes a lot on the reviews, have them prepped for the offseason. And then I don't know about Nania, but I'll be back in the next week or so with another podcast. Nania is always welcome to jump on. We'll figure that out. But for now, we will see you guys later.